is a YouTube thing. It is. All right, folks. We are a few minutes after 1 o'clock. Sorry to get everybody settled so quick, but let's get started. Welcome. Welcome to the March Full Board meeting, and welcome to everybody who's here for their very first meeting. This is our first meeting in over 2 years with a full board, and I, for one, am very excited to see it. We have a lot of things that we've got to get done today and tomorrow. It's a very full agenda, and I'm looking forward to tackling all these issues with everybody. We're going to be covering quite a bit of material. We'll start with community reuse organization today, and then we'll go into the budget, and we'll talk about the budget priorities letter, and that's a big deal for this board. That is a big document that, well, I say it's big, it's usually a page, but it goes up to headquarters. It joins DOE's SR's budget information. So what you do today will help inform the decisions that are made for 2024. I hope you enjoy going through it as much as I'm going to enjoy helping us get to the end of that road today. As we get through these presentations, please remember that take your time, ask folks to go slow, ask questions to understand. If you're not sure about asking something yourself, feel free to text your question to me and I'll read it out for the presenter. We're also going to be doing things a little bit differently than we have in the past at Greg's request, and I think it worked well at orientation. We're going to interrupt presenters as we go along, not just today, but also tomorrow. You'll notice in front of you have a question card. Can I steal yours, Katrina? If you have a question, just go ahead and put it up. We'll call on you. We'll get your question answered. Presenters, I'm going to ask you, if you would, if it's a question that you're going to address later in your presentation, just let them know. We don't have to skip ahead. We don't get to get to the end first, but we'll get through everything together. A few other housekeeping items, restrooms right across the hallway. Board members, you'll notice that you have a printed copy of the strategic vision in front of you. That's part of your information packet. That's that Combs document that Katrina's picking up. You'll have the talking points and then the presentations for our meeting today and tomorrow. Any questions about anything we've discussed so far? It's been a while since we've done this, right? One other thing that we're going to be doing today, board members, is taking your board member portrait. So Heather's going to probably tap you on the shoulder and ask you to step outside throughout this afternoon. And at some point, we'll try to get everybody together for a brief, real quick, and take a group photo. So get ready, get your picture faces on. Greg, would you like to introduce everybody today? Or, I don't mean introduce, I just meant, hi, I'm James, and I'm delivering heart attacks today. No, if you would give your intro today.
All right, thank you, James. Welcome, everybody, to the first meeting of what I will call the CAB of 2022. And good afternoon to our 6 continuing members who've been with us now through 2020 and 2021, our 8 returning members who are back after a break for a couple of years, and very much welcome to our 7 new members. It's nice to have a full board together for the first time, and we were talking about it earlier this morning, about 2 years. Welcome, you all. Thank you, CAB members, for your service to the community, the CAB, and the DOE. As I've mentioned before, there are many ways to provide public service, but few offer the opportunity to address the profound issues we address here. The legacy and cleanup of decades of production of nuclear weapons and nuclear research. And few offer the opportunity for service not only to our current friends, neighbors, and communities, but also service to our children and our children's children, indeed beyond that. That is, few offer the opportunity for what I think of as generational service. And thank you, teams from DOE and other federal agencies, South Carolina DHEC, the Department of Health and Environmental Control, and SRS contractors. I know your work is hard and complicated, and that it requires extraordinary and oftentimes unique knowledge and capability. I appreciate your efforts and recognize the challenges you face and so often skillfully overcome. Thank you, James and CAB team, for the excellent meeting you put together for us. The agenda includes both of our distinct products, we reference them, at orientation, education of the CAB, and CAB advising of DOE. On the education side, we're going to get updates and presentations from relevant agencies, DOE, EPA, South Carolina DHEC, as well as on specific programs such as the solid waste program, the occupational radiation protection program. Because this is our first meeting with a number of new members, I'll note, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead on some of the things. Sorry about that. Some of the questions I'll be thinking about regarding the presentations are, for instance, for Ken Wells of the Salt and Sludge Preparation Overview, when will the tanks of liquid waste be closed now that all the pieces are in place? What are the biggest obstacles to tank closure? For Derek Watkins, on the budget update, how have the budget priorities changed under the new presidential administration, if at all? And what challenges and opportunities have risen at SRS because of any changes? And for Jack Parker, on the occupational radiation protection program, what's the evidence that the program is safe for work? How many instances of radiological mishaps have workers experienced? These are just some of the questions that I have and hope to get answered. And I'll note because this is our first meeting with a number of new members, I'll note that none of these questions require any technical or scientific expertise to ask. Always ask when you have questions. CAB members are not expected to be scientific or engineering experts. And on the advising side, we have a very important task, as James mentioned. As many people who think about organizations will tell you, if you want to know what an organization's true priorities are, just look at its budget. Talk is cheap, budgeted dollars are not. Today, we're going to draft our letter to DOE that identifies our priorities for the budget for environmental management at SRS. And tomorrow, we're scheduled to vote on that letter, our budget priorities letter, as James referenced. We get a lot of briefings, we write a lot of recommendations, but I contend this letter is the most important statement of our priorities to environmental cleanup, environmental cleanup and management at SRS. Thank you again for your service. If there's anything I can do to help you in any way, please let me know. Have a great meeting. James is to you.
Our first update, really, from DOE. I just want to remind you about asking questions. Greg brought up something earlier today, and it was kind of fun in the way that he said it. He said, so you've told me this, now what? And it brings up something that we talked about at orientation. We mentioned this concept of, we hear about what's going on inside the fence line at Savannah River site, but you need to also understand how it's impacting you outside the fence line, right? So I think that question is always fair game as we're going through these topics and having these discussions, is to turn around and say, right, now what? How does this impact me? If the presentation doesn't make it clear, make sure that one of you asks, what does this mean for me living outside the fence? All right, Mike Bundy, you ready, sir? Let's hop to it.
Ready? Okay. Well, welcome everybody here on our first board meeting of 2022, and it's great really to see everybody here. Very exciting to have a full complement of the board. And I know we had a orientation in February that I understand went very well, and we had an opportunity to get you those who wanted out to the site to see what that complex looks like. So we're glad to have had that opportunity. So again, welcome aboard. We hope your time here will be valuable and rewarding, and provide us the sort of recommendations that we need from the community to do the right thing out there at the site. Okay, a few updates of what's happening at the site. First of all, budget. I'm sure you've all heard or read in the news that the President signed the Consolidated Appropriations Act on March 15th. Didn't know it was called that until I just read it to you now, but I just knew it was the 22 budget, halfway through at the 22 budget. But it came out very, very good for us, and Derek will be talking about that in a bit. But our portion of the budget is $1.7 billion, and the total for SRS is a little over $3 billion. And that's a pretty good increase for our years. We do expect the President's budget for fiscal year 23 to be released later this month, and We're also starting to work on our, to develop our fiscal year 24 budget request. That's the input we're looking from you all is for our priorities, so we can factor that into that request. As a matter of fact, I'll be going up to DC.
Can we move the mic a little bit closer to you? Thanks. You were just kind of cutting in and out for some of us.
That's it. That's good.
That ought to do it.
So we'll, I'll be going up to DC to have the preliminary discussions at the headquarters about the fiscal year 24 budget, so we can look what the priorities want to be across the complex, compare everybody's issues. It's always a very entertaining meeting. And as I said, you'll hear more from Derek Watkins, our Deputy Chief Financial Officer, in tomorrow's presentation. So next, we can talk about COVID status. We recently dropped our mask mandate at the site as we're following the CDC revised guidelines. They go about assessing the COVID situation in communities differently than they had in the past. In the past, it was just the case rate per 100,000 over the last 7 days, and that determined what your situation was. But now they combine that with hospitalizations, hospital capacity. And so the area around Aiken is low at this point, and so we were able to do away with the masks, and we're hoping it stays that way. Certainly a lot more comfortable coming to work in that manner. Now, our workforce is back on site, and on Friday we only had one employee quarantined due to a positive COVID test, so that's a pretty remarkable drop from where we were early in January. So another topic I typically cover in these updates is the status of our contracts. So starting with the security contract, DOE announced the award of that contract last year, but a protest was filed, and we determined it was appropriate to take corrective action related to that procurement. So we're still working our way through that, and we'll notify the offerers once corrective action is complete. Centera, our current security provider, has been extended during this period while we work on that proposal, on that solicitation again. The integrated mission completion contract, was awarded last fall, and the liquid waste operations have been officially transitioned from Savannah River remediation to the Savannah River Mission Completion LLC as of February 27th. Dave Olson addressed the cabin January meeting, gave you all some details on their mission and organization, and you'll be hearing more from them later on in the agenda and throughout the year. The Parsons contract, as you recall, they constructed and were required to operate the salt waste processing facility for the first year. That's coming to a close. SRMC is in the process of executing that transition, which will be complete by March 27th. Then we'll have the entire liquid waste system under one contractor, and I'm sure Jim Folk will give you more information on where we go from here on that. The Savannah River Management and Operating contract acquisition, that contract is currently run by Savannah River Nuclear Solutions. On November 9th, we announced an indefinite delay to the final request for proposal. We did that to re-examine the RFP to ensure it provides for the best possible mission execution and value for the taxpayer, as the National Nuclear Security Administration has committed to increasing its scope of work at SRS, which includes the full execution of their two-pit strategy for production of plutonium pits. Advanced Manufacturing Collaborative is a facility we're building that the Savannah River National Lab will operate at the campus of USC Aiken. Northwind Construction has the contract for that. They completed preliminary design in November. Final design is in progress. Forecast for completion early this summer. Got a groundbreaking scheduled April 19th. That will initiate early site preparation activities to prepare for building construction. So everything's going very well on that contract. Construction completion is targeted for the second quarter of calendar year 2024. Okay, moving on to specific operational progress. In nuclear materials, L area continues to receive spent nuclear fuel shipments, both domestic and foreign. H Canyon continues processing material test reactor and high flux reactor spent nuclear fuels. And we're also working with the department to determine if we can accelerate those operations. And we'll provide more information on that once we get a final decision. K area continues with 4-shift plutonium downblend operations in preparation for shipping material to waste isolation plant, pilot plant. The facility also completed its shipping readiness milestone earlier this month, which is one of several key milestones required to be completed before we can begin WIP shipments. We're continuing building 235F deactivation activities with plans to complete the activation in calendar year 22. And deactivation essentially means we cease operations and we shut down the facility. In this case, it means we're going to remove all electric power from the building. It'll go cold and dark. We go in there still periodically to make sure everything's okay inside while we wait for the actual decommissioning phase. The engineering evaluation cost analysis, you'll see that listed as the EECA sometimes, for the decommissioning of the facilities and final review by EPA. Now, there I said decommissioning. So decommissioning is when we put the facility in its final state, its final disposition state, which could be, depending on what building you're talking about, it could be removing it down to the grade, it could be in situ disposition, as we've done with a couple of reactors out there, where we just fill them up with grout, or it could be something else. And so we do have EPA and South Carolina DHEC have agreed with the EECA for this, so we are going to commence the planning for that decommissioning of 235F. EECA is a comparison of alternative end states for the decommissioning and closure, and it describes our preferred option, which in this case is in situ decommissioning by grouting the process areas and placing a durable engineered roof on the facility. FH Laboratory, the site consolidated its laboratory analytical services to Savannah River National Lab last year. That's going to save us money in doing the surveillance and maintenance and operating another facility. We combined all those capabilities, shuttered the lab facilities that were located in F and H area and moved the capabilities to SRNL over in A area. Transuranic waste shipments to the waste isolation pilot plant. We've completed 6 legacy true waste shipments in FY21 and FY22. We've completed 4 shipments to date. And legacy waste is older waste that really the site had gathered up before we actually began the cleanup mission. So trying to get rid of all that material. And we're very close to having completed all our legacy shipments. And as mentioned earlier, we plan to ship true waste shipments out of WIP, out of K area later this fiscal year. Over in liquid waste, the salt waste processing facilities has processed 388,000 gallons so far in FY22 and over 2.7 million gallons to date since we started commissioning in October of 20. So it's been working pretty well, and we'll get you more details on that operation. We do have a smooth transition in progress, as I said, from Parsons to SRMC. Saltstone production facility, more than 1.1 million gallons in fiscal year 22 so far of decontaminated salt solutions has been transferred to the Saltstone production facility for permanent disposal in our Saltstone disposal units. So, as you know, we combine those that 1.1 million gallons of the salt solution with fly ash and slag to make a grout that goes into those SDUs. Saltstone disposal units themselves I know you all saw these during the tour, 32 million gallon cylindrical tanks, 375 foot in diameter, 43 foot high. SDUs 8 and 9 construction continues simultaneously, which is it's great that we can do two of them at the same time, because that really optimizes the use of the crews and ultimately helps cut costs for the program. Construction for SDU 8 is complete, and pre-stressing cable wrapping is in progress. There's still bells to plant to put on the top of that tank, but the main concrete's all in place. And we continue with SDU 9 with 14 of 14 floor slabs and 9 of 25 walls. 80 of 208 columns are complete. SDU 10 through 12, those are the remaining SDUs we need to complete the entire mission. And we did receive our budget for FY22, so now we can begin site preparations activities in the field for those facilities. The Defense Waste Processing Facility, to date, 19 canisters have been poured, and so far in 2022, we've double stacked 218 canisters in glass waste storage building. So good progress there. Tank preparation for waste removal. We're continuing to work 15 tanks to support feed preparations for SWPF, DWPF, and Ticker. And as we told you, that's a significant increase over the last couple of years when we did 3 or 4 tanks at a time. So total of 10 tanks are currently undergoing preparation activities from planning and design to modifications in the field to support salt dissolution and removal, so we can compile and qualify salt batches. 5 additional tanks are undergoing preparation activities to support sludge removal, and salt dissolution is underway in 3 of the salt tanks in support of generating the feed for SWPF, and 2 of the sludge tanks are prepped for sludge removal to support DWPF feeds preparation. This work is critical as it takes more than 3 years to prepare a tank to remove waste and prepare a salt batch or a sludge batch for DWPF. We had another objective was to grout F-tank farm diversion boxes 5 and 6. We completed number 5 in November, and diversion box 6 grouting is just about complete. Entombment design of both diversion boxes is in progress. Grouting these diversion boxes is a significant step toward the operational closure of the first high-level waste facility at SRS since 2016. Over at the lab was recently recognized by GSA, Government Services Agency, for the Interagency Committee for Aviation Policy as the U.S. government's top unmanned aerial systems program. So the GSA ICAP said we were a top UAS program, if you want it in acronym version. That's useful. I would note that this capability is now supporting other federal agencies besides DOE, and has recently concluded significant demonstrations of systems being funded by the Department of Homeland Security. So it's quite an honor. We're proud of the work the lab's doing in this area. It's really an incredible capability. Also, in collaboration with other national labs and universities, SRNL will deploy and demonstrate an integrated groundwater monitoring system in F area called Altimus, Advanced Long-Term Environmental Monitoring Systems. It's an integrated package of monitoring tools designed to ensure long-term environmental protection at DOE's legacy sites and eventually reduce the cost of that monitoring across the complex by over 90% over the coming 5 decades. SRNL also hosted a 2-day virtual workshop on advanced manufacturing core competency that was attended by representatives from all our university partners and senior SRNL staff. They had presentations by organization and breakout sessions in 3 areas: environment, energy, materials, and sensors and automation. Information obtained from the workshops will be used to further collaboration between SRNL and the academic teams in a larger topical meeting in May. And I'm also glad to tell you that the SRS Ultimate Turkey Hunt for wounded warriors and mobility impaired hunters will resume this year and will be held on Saturday, April 30th. Approximately 15 hunters will be chosen to participate in this year's 1-day event. Hunters are escorted by badged SRS employees, and any harvested turkeys are monitored to be sure they can be released to the hunters. And we get hunters from all over the country that want to come and hunt these turkeys. So it's a pretty neat event. We get a lot of volunteers. I think there are about a 4-to-1 ratio of volunteers to actual hunters during this event. And now, the last thing, what I view personally is rather sad news, is that this could be Thomas Johnson's last meeting with us. He's made the unfortunate decision to retire in May, but we do congratulate him, and he's put in 41 years for the federal government in service, and so a round of applause for Thomas for all those great years.
Either everyone here understood every word of that, or no one wanted to be the one to interrupt the site manager. All right, Narendra, let's start with you.
Good afternoon. I have a twofold question for the contracts. Is there a possibility that SRNS contract or SRMC contract can be merged together? I see there are a lot of activities, they overlap, especially in managing nuclear materials.
So the way the SRMC contract is written, there's an option to move some portions of nuclear materials over to SRMC, but that is the only component we've arranged to do that. Because the SRMC contract is an end-state contract. It's designed to get to a completion state. Some of the other work that's done by SRS for EM doesn't have a completion date, so it wouldn't be fitting to move it to the SRMC end-state contract model, which is done by task orders that are all centered on final objectives. Moving solid waste, for example, doesn't really have an end state because even when the EM mission is well past the end of the SRMC contract, we'll still have a need for taking care of solid waste. The SRS contract also takes care of the downblend of plutonium, which is a mission shared with NNSA, which is about a 25-year program, well past SRMC. And then the SRNS contract also does a lot of work for NNSA. So that contract will have to be in existence, and SRMC can't take over that because tritium has no end state. Plutonium pit production doesn't really have an end state. So it doesn't mix with the contract style that we put in place for SRMC.
My follow-up question is, I was looking at the organization for the SRMC. There is no diversity in the senior management. Any reason for that?
Well, to win the contract, SRMC had to put together the best people they thought they could find at the time. And of course, we had a number of bidders for that. So it was a challenging environment, and there were a number of other contracts being let at the same time throughout DOE. So it was challenging for the contractors to find the right mix of individuals, the right experience to do the mission. But I would tell you that at our first meeting with Dave Olson, he acknowledged that very issue, and they're intent on fixing that.
All right. Dave, I believe you had your card up next.
Thank you, and thank you, Mike, for your remarks. I was reading the EM Strategic Vision 2022 to 2032, and it talks about SRS disposing true waste, transuranic waste, in WIP in New Mexico. And in a report issued, I think it was last Tuesday, by the Government Accountability Office, GAO, it said that there were plans for WIP, the only underground nuclear waste repository in the country, may be delayed. In DOE's budget material, it states that in fiscal year 2022, the department will maintain safe and secure storage of special nuclear material and continue activities in K area to downblend and package plutonium for disposal at WIP. The Savannah River site has, as of 2021, and I know you mentioned the 10 shipments last year and this year, it has, as of June 2021, 640 cubic meters of transuranic waste, legacy and newly generated, in storage. And over 100 shipments to WIP will be required to dispose of the transuranic waste in storage. In your FY 2022 budget request to Congress, it states that SRS plans to ship 7 cubic meters of contact handle transuranic waste to WIP, depending on the availability to accept by WIP. And also that it says that SRS would like to increase the number of contact handle transuranic waste shipments to WIP. Do you have any sense at this point how the GAO report might alter your disposal plans for the SRS true waste shipments?
I don't know that it really would. There's a national true program. We all get together, balance the objectives throughout the entire complex about who can ship true waste to WIP and when. Some of the other locations have consent decrees, I believe. I'm not quite sure on that, but there are some of the other locations in the complex have priorities that drive them to have to ship their material before us. So we're a little bit lower on a priority than some other folks. But we have plenty of storage area. We don't really have a problem with the material that we have at this point. We're always glad to help out and move it whenever we can. But there really is an urgent need at this point for us to. Yeah.
Dave, also, as far as the shipments to WIP, Savannah River is also one of the fill-in locations, so when the other sites, if they have any issues making their shipments, they will call on Savannah River to provide additional shipments.
Thank you.
Bobby?
Good afternoon. Mr. Buddy, I have two questions. One, I didn't hear you address the deer hunts. Are they going to have those this year? And you talked about the consolidation of F and H lab with the national lab. Is there going to be an expansion to the national lab to house the people from analytical labs in F area?
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, Mac, but the deer hunts are back on this year, right? They've already, as far as the National Lab didn't really expand, they just refit some of their facilities, and we were able to incorporate all those folks that were in F&H lab back into the lab over in A area. So that's already complete.
All right. Any other questions from around the table, folks? Charles?
No, we were at 1.7 billion. I missed the number that you went to.
For fiscal year 22, 1.75, and I think that final number was about 10 million more than we requested in the
Okay.
official.
So we're
President's
still
budget
above
request.
our request level, so we were basically fully funded.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Bobby, did you have another follow-up? It's okay, I just want to check and make sure. Anything else from around the table? The only question I had is, I'm pretty sure you can't answer, is what makes a turkey hunt ultimate as opposed to just a regular turkey hunt. But, I mean,
Size of the turkeys, I believe.
size of the turkey, there you go, that's it.
I'd also just like to give a shout out to Mike for not using acronyms. Did you notice that, Greg?
That's completely due to the people who wrote those words for me, which is Amy.
All right. All right. Any more questions for DOE before we move on? Going once, going twice. John, EPA, how you doing?
Yeah, good. John Richards with EPA, and just because there's new faces, I'm the what's called the FFA Project Manager, Federal Facility Agreement Project Manager. My equivalent on my left, Susan Fulmer from the state, and Brian Hennessy from DOE are my equivalents for our Superfund cleanup. Also on our team, Rob Pope, that I know a lot of the members have been on here a while know, and obviously the DOE people, my mentor, and he's been FFA before, and he's over all the tanks and a lot of the big projects going on. We also have Deidre Lloyd at most of the D area, Greg Van Trees does some of the M and other areas, and Janet Dawson is one of our new Region 4 employees. She used to be with our Tech Law, our contractor we've had for most of the last 15 years that does a lot of our reviews and walk downs with us. She's also helped visit us, so she's joining our team and be helping Rob with the tanks and helping me with my Oak Ridge projects as well. And we have a new, in EPA Region 4, you might not know, but every Superfund site is assigned a community involvement coordinator. Usually they help set up when we're in charge of public meetings. Obviously, federal agency is the lead for those type of things, but they still get involved. So some of you may have known Kyle Bryant. He worked on Savannah River, our community leader for many years. He's moved on to another job, which I forgot what that is. So Angela Miller, a veteran in a lot of our sites, will be joining and hoping to get her to maybe one of the upcoming CAB meetings and some of the other community training we have coming up. In the past, Rob and I myself have given, usually maybe once a year, it's really for especially the new people that don't know Circle Superfund that well. What is our Circle, how is Circle implemented at Savannah River? So it's kind of an overall general talk of EPA. So I'm usually requested to do that at least once a year when there's new people, so I'm sure Mr. Tanner will let me know when that's coming up. But that gets in more detail, especially some of the things I'll be talking about, because a lot of our things we do are obviously Superfund related. So we have a big 5-year review walk down coming next Monday at the site. Obviously, many members of the state beside me will be there, my contractor. And that's where so those who know, every 5 years for a traditional Superfund site, you look at all the remedies that have already been completed, at least 5 years. If there's any changes, et cetera. But Savannah River is so huge with all of our operable units, they actually break it into a different 5-year review category every year. So instead of one every 5 years, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, we now have one every year. So like the one coming up that we'll be walking down is the geosynthetic cover systems. That's the one for this year. Last year, the one we just completed and all signed was engineered cover systems. So each one is, again, every 5 years of those. And as I mentioned in our last meeting, we did have one of our big targets for headquarters and obviously our region is a record decision. That's the final action on completing a remedy decision. That big one was on the lower 3 runs, and I think that was one of the last parts of lower 3 runs that have been going for a while. And we'll be actually doing a walk down of some of the land use controls Thursday with the state and DOE this week. And as Mike mentioned, the 235 decommissioning action memo, that is very high priority for EPA as well. So we're happy to see that's done, and we've just given some of our final approval to that action memo and project to get that going. Yes, and as Jim Falcono and his team, we're very anxious to get involved in the new tank milestones. We'll be probably, State and I and DOE will be meeting with his team upcoming probably early this summer, hopefully, on all the new milestones that we hope to see for that. And this may be a final note that those who aren't familiar with, again, EPA, that I don't know how much DOE and DOD got a lot of the new infrastructure bill. They literally call it bill, talking acronyms. But a lot of that is coming to EPA, so it's one of our biggest hiring in a long time in EPA, but almost entirely all that's going to private Superfund sites. That's what it's geared towards. So there's a lot of those sites that where EPA has to be the fund lead, they call it, when there's no company to help do part of the money. So it's not federal agencies for that. But a lot of those big private sites will be now getting addressed. I think that's all I have. Thanks.
Seeing none, let's move on over to DHEC. Susan?
Good afternoon. I'm Susan Fulmer, and as John mentioned, I'm the Federal Facility Agreement Project Manager for the state of South Carolina. So he already mentioned several things that I was also going to mention, and that includes the walk downs that we're planning this week and next week for lower 3 runs and for the 5-year remedy review. So, you know, just wanted to mention that the state has a presence at the site through our Federal Facility Agreement Program, as well as our ESOP program, which is the Environmental Surveillance and Oversight Program, which Greg is here representing this afternoon. So if you have questions about their annual report, he can address those. But we continue to meet regularly with the site, either through online meetings or in person. We have a plan to meet in a couple of weeks on the liquid waste system plan, which, as John mentioned, we're getting ready to sort of start the talks again about the liquid waste system with Jim and EPA and renegotiate those milestones. So sort of step one for that process is to walk through the comments that the state had on the liquid waste system plan and make sure that we have a firm understanding of what they're proposing there as we start our negotiations. So that's something we're looking forward to. And then the other thing I just wanted to highlight again that Mike Bundy mentioned was the Building 235F, the engineering and evaluation cost analysis, or the ECA, that the state and EPA recently approved that document, which was a big effort to get to that point. And so there will be a public comment period for that document coming up soon. It hasn't been, I think the environmental bulletin is under review, and so that should be coming out in the latter part of April for public comment. That's all I have. Any questions for me?
Any questions? Jim?
In Savannah recently, one of the major networks reported that DHEC was planning or about to split into 2 separate agencies. Does this have any impact on activities here at SRS, and if so?
So there is a Senate bill under consideration. It's S2 is the bill, and it would split the agency into an environmental agency and a health agency. And under what we have seen so far for the bill, the new DHEC environmental side would be the Department of Environmental Services, and it would retain all of the existing programs that we have for environmental work. There is a piece of the Department of Natural Resources, a water resources program that would come into DHEC. But as far as work at the site is concerned, we would still maintain our Superfund program and our FFA program and the ESOP program. All of those things would just move to the new Environmental Services Department.
Okay, thank you.
Greg?
Thank you very much for the for the briefing. Excuse me. So you mentioned that y'all are seeking or will be getting public comment on the 235F. I'm just curious, how much comment do you get, public comment do you get on something like that?
Historically, we haven't probably gotten a whole lot of comments.
Dozens,
But-
hundreds, thousands?
Dozens,
Okay.
probably more like it.
What do you take from that?
I think that shows the work of the CAB, educating the community on the work that's done at the site, for one. And I, so this is a great forum for learning about 235F. It's been on the agenda many times over the last few years. So that's, I would say, a big part of it.
Okay. Do y'all publicize, I guess in the media, that things like that are under consideration, you're taking
It is.
public comment?
That is handled by DOE. The environmental bulletin is something that they put out. I believe there's also some radio spot announcement as well.
Yes, so we will do an environmental bulletin on that when it comes out for public comment, and you guys will receive that. I think we send you an email directly saying that it's available for public comment, and there'll be 30 days that you'll have to respond to that. And you can choose to do that as a board, or you can do
Yeah.
it individually.
Okay, I wondered if we could do something like that as a board. Okay, thank you very much.
Any other follow-up questions for DHEC? All right, seeing none. We ready to move on down our agenda? Thank you, Susan, I appreciate it. All right. Rick, you want to get mic'd up? Let's move next into the Community Reuse Organization presentation. This will be our very first presentation for 2022. And Rick's a great dynamic speaker, so I figured he'd be a great one for us to start with.
Am I on? Oh, thank you. I'll need that too, won't I? Wow, first cab meeting in, full cab meeting in a couple of years. Headline speaker, or either I'm one with a target on, I'm not sure. But I also debated wearing a black shirt. You know, used to worry about dandruff, you know, getting on your shirt. Walking in, I was worried that I had pollen on it. You don't see any green anywhere, do you? I've talked to the cab numerous times. All of y'all are new. Some of this is going to be repeat for a few folks, Greg, and Ms. Britt's going to have to hear this presentation for the second time. But long time ago, kind of sounds like a fairy tale, doesn't it? But long time ago, I was the technical advisor to the Citizens Advisory Board back when they had technical advisors. That was over 14 years ago. So it's been the one word of wisdom: give it time, and actually attend as many meetings as you can, because it's a repetitive process to learn about the Savannah River site and the acronyms. Whether they use acronyms or not, it just takes time. So give it some time. Our rule of thumb was almost 2 to 3 years for a cab person to really understand how all the puzzle pieces fit together. So just give it some time, it'll get there. So again, I'm going to give an update about the CRO, what that means, who we are, again, background and history. And then I think James said, okay, what about outside the fence? What does Savannah River site mean? That's what I'm going to talk about, and the majority of the presentation is related to outside the fence. What does the site mean? And we used to tell the cab, don't forget about outside the fence. Sometimes your recommendations, all we did was inside the fence, technical related, but the impacts that are happening inside the fence sometimes parlay into activities outside the fence, especially budgets. So you have an issue with budgets or your priorities you're working on, keep in mind those have some financial issues with those. All right, hard to see a little bit, but the zigzag line is basically layoffs at the site. So this is over from about 1993 to 2022. We haven't added the update, but through 21. The blue line is the employment at the site. So some of you, I thought, maybe have worked at the site before. Is that true? So what was called K-reactor restart was way back in 1980s, late into the early 90s. There were 26,000 people at Savannah River site. All right, now wrap your head around 26,000 people. Take Amazon, the 2 fulfillment centers that open up on the Georgia side are going to have over 3,000 people. Well, the site had 26,000. So what happened is K-reactor restart went away. And no offense to the DOE folks, but sometimes missions start up and they don't quite get finished. So this was one of those that started but didn't get quite finished, and there was a workforce transition, and that's why that blue line drops tremendously in those early periods of time. Anybody else, military or veterans in the group? All right, well, not you, Mike, and Mac, you can't know. But something else was happening in this time period in the Department of Defense. Anybody remember BRAC? Base realignment and closures. Well, they were closing military installations. And when DOD closed military installations, they established what they called redevelopment authorities to help the community use the base, use the economics, use the people that work there in the civilian side mainly, find new jobs. Well, DOE did something very similar in that early time period. So my organization was formed in 1993. We'll be 30 years old next year. At that time, in 93, some of y'all may have heard the old politicians, Cynthia McKinney, Butler Derrick, got together and said, we better start planning for this. How are we going to handle these workforce transitions? How are we going to find new jobs for the people? What are we going to do? So that's really how we started off.
Question.
Sure.
Dave Vavakas Cab. On that blue line, does that include DOE, all the contracts, EPA, forestry?
That is everybody.
Okay.
And you can see how it leveled off there at the very last. We've been pretty stable, 10 to 12,000 people for the last 10 years. It just so happens that's also coincides to the contractor contracts too. So it'll be interesting to see how this progresses. Are we going to stay, and budgets. So the budgets also have to play. Early 2000s there, that we had another workforce reduction, right? So this does not include Recovery Act employees, if you remember the Recovery Act, but it's basically the stable workforce at the site. So going back to 93, they developed community reuse organizations as part of 3161. There were 15. I think y'all's introductory slide, you'll see that there's 8 CABs, but they're not always called CABs, right? Site-specific advisory board. So you kind of take your own identity. There were 15 formed back then. These are the community reuse organizations today. So we're not just one off organization, just one entity here. We don't have a direct affiliation, but a lot of the other major DOE sites have community reuse organizations. But you will notice not all of them use community reuse organization in their name. Just like there's not maybe one other CAB, I think. The others use site-specific advisory board. So we're regionally focused. When they formed our group, our bylaws said, we want your organization set up to cover Aiken, Allendale, and Barnwell on the South Carolina side, and Columbia and Richmond County on the Georgia side. So we're a 2-state, 5-county organization. Half of my board is from Georgia and half from South Carolina. So poor pitiful me, I have 22 board members. So y'all can say, oh, bless his heart. But it's not easy having 22 bosses, but that's what I've got. We formally changed our name in 2006. I've been president and CRO of the CRO since 2008. So I'm coming up on 14 years this June, matter of fact. But if you think the SRS Community Reuse Organization was hard, we were actually called SARDI, the Savannah River Regional Diversification Initiative. When we were originally formed, that's the name they picked. We were designated to be the Community Reuse Organization in 1996. So the organization formed before we were actually designated as a Community Reuse Organization. Here's our appointed entities. Each one of those have people they can put on our board. Those are our current board members. Some of you may recognize some names on there, some may not, but these are the 11 from each state. All right, we don't get any direct operational funding from DOE, from the state, from any source. I'm just teased at the lifetime learning that Ms. Britt was in. SRS is in her name, but I cannot get you a job there, and I cannot get you a contract there. So SRS CRO, SRS CAB also gets confusing because I've gotten some requests that usually should have come to y'all that came to us. So we're really not tied in any direct capacity to the site. We're a separate 501c3 organization. We mainly get surplus equipment from the site. and we sell that surplus equipment, and I'm going to get right next slide or two to tell you what we do with it. But we also early on got DOE funding to begin with that we put out for economic projects. A lot of entrepreneurs came forth, and we were successful on a very few. A lot of them were not too successful, but we were able to build an endowment fund in addition to our property sales as well. So you will see that's why we're in a position to be able to give as much money back out to the community as what we do. So we keep 20% for managing the surplus property. And you'll see that that number's in the millions, so 20% DOE's getting a pretty good investment, return on their investment. So we take the money, and again, 5 counties, you can see from this slide or in your packet if you have it, we try to balance that out between our 5 counties. And you'll say, well, Aiken is not getting their share, and we need to give money to Aiken. Well, the money is sitting in there, he just hasn't asked for it, and the money goes through the economic development organizations. We do not accept unsolicited grant applications. This is all done through our board and through our economic development groups, and we also use some of our funds from a regional standpoint. So all those add up to about over $5 million in the last 7.5 years. Now, my organization is 4 people, so that's a pretty good number for a 2-state organization in 5 counties to be able to get this amount of money out into the public domain. These are some of the typical projects. Some of y'all may have heard of. Unisys is actually right downtown Augusta. Some of y'all may not know they were brought in. Sage Mill is where Bridgestone Firestone is located. We do a lot more economic development type projects working with infrastructure, those types of improvements. We also do a lot of workforce. We act as the fiscal agent for a lot of DOE grants. And if you're interested, Wednesday, you can go to breakfast if you want to get up at 7:30 and attend the Citizens for Nuclear Technology Awareness, CNTA, breakfast. And Ms. Mindy Metz, who is our program director, will talk about all of these, or where we are with these grants and the process that we're involved in it. But we started back in 2011 with our first grant, and we have grown those. Mainly then it was USC Aiken, Aiken Tech, Augusta Tech, USC Aiken, and USC Salkehatchie were our original 5 academic partners. And then later, I think it was Workforce 2 and Workforce 1, we have added Claflin College to our list of colleges that we're supporting. They're doing the training, we're just the fiscal agent to get them the money. And then recently, with all the pit production work that's supposed to be coming, there was $7 million put in last year's appropriations that were going to minority serving and HBCUs. And that was $7 million, and that money was split between South Carolina and New Mexico. So we were the fiscal agent to get $3.5 million distributed to all 8 HBCUs in South Carolina. That's a whole different topic. That whole thing about surplus is a whole different talk, James. I'm not going to get to that today. I know, that's a long one. So these are our main focus areas. Again, economic development, workforce, community issues. We do go up and educate, if that's the right word, our political folks in D.C. occasionally about new missions, about the budgets needed for this or that, your priority list that you're going to work on. In years past, I have also provided a priority list. Hopefully, Amy will include me on that email so I can give them my priority as well, besides just the cabs. But that's what we work on, the community issues. And today I'm going to talk about the economic impact study. What does the site mean outside the fence? All right, this is my first commandment. I know James has all that whole list of commandments up there, but this is mine. All right, these are not my numbers. These are numbers we're reporting that were given to us. All right, so just keep that in mind. But here is a link, because I'm kind of the eye candy for this presentation, right? Go to our website and you can actually see the actual report, because I'm just going to give you kind of a top level. You can actually drill down if you really want to get to any of the specifics. This is not our first rodeo, as they say. So this is our third time we did the economic impact study. Some folks maybe remember when DuPont was here or Westinghouse was here, where we had one contractor. They kind of did these reports back then. But since we split up to multiple contractors, not too many of them want to use their award fee to spend to do this if it's going to cover other contractors. So we have taken this rollover since 2010. So this is our third. And I'm sorry, I don't know why it looks good on my screen when I send it to James, but it gets messed up somewhere in the weeds of cybersecurity. But again, the only thing we did differently was we looked more focused at South Carolina and Georgia, and we did a small business impact that we hadn't done before, and we also looked at an age profile, and I'll touch on those two in the presentation. Something else we did differently, Simon Metcalf, some of you may have heard that name. Simon is an economics professor at Augusta University. Simon has been involved in all three of the economic impact studies to some degree, and Simon actually brought in his graduate students to be used for this study. They gave our presentation back in December, and they were very, very grateful for the opportunity to apply real numbers, real experience, as opposed to just using textbooks examples. So they were very much appreciative, and these were the young folks that were involved in this. Again, it was 2020 data. So we throw numbers out, the numbers change. So don't get hung up on one particular number. Take it from a broad standpoint. The numbers change. The employment changes every day. Every day. The number of people here and there, contractors change. So take this from a broad perspective, not drill it down to the individual numbers. This is the model they use. Any economic professors or people background? Good. All right. All right, economic impact is really measured in three different components, right? You have indirects, directs, and induced. All right, directs is basically the money spent at SRS. That's the direct expenditures. Now, y'all will learn, well, you probably already know. SRS is not, no one gets a paycheck that says SRS on it, right? Y'all understand that, right? SRS is a place, it's a location. We say the site to encompass everybody, right? But there is no one entity called Savannah River Site from an employer standpoint. So when I'm using it here, I mean everybody combined. This is the direct expenditures for the Savannah River Site total. All right, and then indirects are basically the goods and services that are bought from other industries. All right, now pay attention to induced effects, because that's going to come in important at the very end. That's how much the workers spend of their income outside the fence. So we'll touch on that as we get a little bit later on. Don't tell my wife, but I did make a mistake, so don't let her know. But there is a typo on this slide, and I'll get to that in a minute. 1.8 billion. I know Mike used 1.7 something, and I think this back in 2020 included NNSA, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the total direct expenditures when we did the study, again, remember my golden rule. I just report numbers. Was 1.8. What that means outside the fence, the total impact expenditures was 2.2 billion. All right. 1.2 billion was spent in my 5-county region that I mentioned. So there are 11,350 something workers in 2020. Again, that number has changed if you go and look it up today. But 8,300 and something of those work in the 5-county area. All right, so not all 11,000, 12,000 work in the 5-county area, or probably even in your area. 50,000 total jobs were supported. There's the error. I'm going to have to change because I keep having it, but don't change it. It's 1.8 multiplier effect, not 1.2.
Thanks, Rick. Sorry, real quick. Mike had also mentioned earlier, I think there was a total budget of about $3 billion for SRS. And I'm wondering, I mean, the study was done by Augusta University, so clearly it's absolutely perfect. But if there is basically $3 billion in round numbers budgeted, it seems like there would be a bigger total economic impact than $2.2 billion.
Yeah,
Do you have
so-
any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so back in 2020, NSA numbers were a lot lower. So the total site budget was only about $2.3 billion at that point. About 1.7 for us, 600 million for NSA. So their budget has increased dramatically here in 22 as they get ready to do SRPPF. The other part, I'm not sure, Rick, if it's just the 5-county area and the vast majority of our expenditures and
It probably-
salaries.
It is that,
It's
and I
not
think
the whole
NNSA
workforce.
did not quite maybe give us the data. So again, the data's only as good as people that they give it.
I think
they
that
get it
I think that probably makes sense. It just seems like there would have been a bigger multiplier. Okay, thank you.
But NNSA portion is getting larger, and that's something the CAB needs to think about. I know you're only, due to your way you're set up under the FAR, and only look at EM, but you have to understand from a broader context that NNSA is getting more and more and new missions involved in the site. Don't know what y'all can do about it, but just letting you know. So how big is $2.2 billion? All right, let that absorb in that this is larger than some of the nations you've heard about gross domestic product. So we throw billions out like it's water. Billions are real numbers and they add up to a lot of impact. All right, the percent of SRS, this is the total workforce. So remember I said there were 8,500 in the 5-county and then almost 11,000, whatever, that 500 and something. This is how the percentage breaks down. And again, you know, we paid for the study, so we looked at our 5 counties is what we did. So Georgia, based upon the total number, was only about 25%. Now, we normally say Georgia has 30% of the workforce lives in Georgia and works at Savannah Riverside. And I'll get to why that number is and what it means. No surprise there on the South Carolina side, the majority of folks that work at the site live in Aiken County. All right, this is of the total 5-county workforce. You can see now Georgia goes back up to 29%, almost at 30% or a third of the workforce. Because when you look at just those 5-county areas, that's what you get. And then again, on the South Carolina side, just looking at the 5-county workforce, they're up around 70% living in the South Carolina side that work at the site. All right, so now this is going to be a little scary. I'm setting you up for it now, all right? Okay. Here's the average salary at the site. Now again, remember our Panda friend, $98,000. And a lot of folks say, well, I'm going tomorrow. Give me Mike Budney's address. Here's my resume. Sign me up. My point is some folks have worked at the site. It's a highly skilled workforce, okay? You've got folks that have clearances that some of us may not be able to get. It's not working out there. So again, certifications and rad protection. The number looks a little scary, but also, I hate to say it, people probably make a little bit more when I got out of Clemson when I did, and we kind of lose sight that salaries have gone up. So this is the average salary based upon the data we have given, or given to us.
Oh, okay, thank you. So my inclination is doing some of the work I do, I would say you have a median instead of a mean. Do you know what the median is?
No,
Okay. What is the maximum salary out there?
we didn't ask that question.
Okay.
And I'm not sure we would get it if we were to ask it.
Well, it's probably public information. Okay.
I don't know if it's
so.
public.
I don't know.
The federal salaries are, I'm not sure the contractor salaries are.
And this is everybody. This is not just Fed, this is contractors as well. So that's why the average means more to us than the mean or what's happening.
Dave Cap, is that a loaded wage number? Does that include benefits such as life insurance, health insurance?
My understanding, going back, and you'll have to look at the website yourself, I believe it does not, it's not totally loaded. No, that's just average wage. Here's the average age. Anybody want to guess what it was 8 years ago? All right, average age 8 years ago was almost 10 years older. It was about 54. Okay, look what's happened in the past 8 years or so. That number has dropped significantly. Now, I teased Mike. I think he's keeping DOE up. Now that Thomas is retired, retiring, that number may drop, several years age. But DOE is age-wise. They come, they don't want to leave. We can't get them to leave. But Savannah River Ecology Lab is the youngest, right? How many of y'all seen the snakes and the alligators? And I'd have to be young to handle the snakes and alligators too, but they're a lot younger, mainly because they're PhD students, right? They're getting their studies and they're including them in their age distribution. But they've done a lot of work at the site reducing that average age, which is good. So here's the age profile. I hear a lot. I have the 4 economic developers on my board in the 5-county area. SRS, the big global SRS, is stealing all my employees. They're taking them from Bridgestone Firestone. They're taking them from Generac. They're taking them from Amazon. They're taking all of our employment. Look at that salary that you just said. They're stealing them. Well, here's the actual age profile, and if you go on the website, you can actually drill down to a particular county. Look at the 18 to 24 number, and I'm just going to start there. That's really what some of the industries are looking for, right? Amazon wants 18 to 24-year-old people, mainly. The site actually has very few in that work category. Again, going back to the skill mix or how it takes to get the skills. So again, just for your purposes, when you look at these numbers, that's what I take away from it, is there's not a lot of 18 to 24-year-olds that the site is stealing from other industries in the area. This is the 5-county. Again, that's where the 2.2 shows up. The directs, and Mike, again, we may need to look at that. There's your 1.1, 1.2 output. That was the directs. So again, I can only report the numbers that were given to us. I don't know if we collected the NNSA numbers appropriately. And the induced, again, we're going to come back to it, take a look at it. Here's the small businesses. Again, my purpose is the 5-county impact. We're $115 roughly million, $1,500 million, yeah. That's 30% of the total expenditures. That's a lot of money. So 30% of the total expenditures goes out to small business. Again, just because SRS is in my name, I cannot get you a contract. You have to talk to Mr. Budney. All right, here's 2020. Now I give it the gradation on the slide is a little exaggerated, and we did that purposely, right? But in the past, we have had about $2.4 billion economic impact from the site. And that's in the last 2 studies, even though they were 5-6 years apart. Anybody want to guess what happened in 2020? Pandemic hit, and guess which number it impacted the most? Induced. So the workforce were not going out, going to restaurants, going to movies. That's where we saw the decrease of $200 million. And that was mainly due to the pandemic aspect of it. It didn't impact the budget. It didn't impact direct. It didn't impact indirect. But the induced from the employees going out and spending out of their paycheck, that's when we saw the difference. All right, last slide. Here's the key points. If you don't even go back and look at at the link I gave you, 2.2 billion is the number we came up with. 15,800 jobs supported. That's total. That's not just site, right? Average wage, $98,000. 115 spent on small businesses in our 5-county area. Average age has dropped to 46, almost 47, and the employment multiplier is 1.8, not the 1.2 mistake that I made. So 1.8, that means for every job at the site, if we have to replace them, we have to come up with an industry, almost 2 people for every job we lose from the site to make up that economic impact difference. That's it.
Phyllis, you have a question?
I was just curious, I started thinking about the average salary, and I was wondering, do you know how that was figured, since y'all didn't do it yourselves?
We asked the contractors that question, and they gave us that number.
Okay, so
And
you
then we
have,
averaged all of them together to come up with
Right.
that number.
Do you have any idea if that included at-risk income, or if that's straight salaries?
My understanding is straight salary is what we asked the question.
Really? Okay, thank you.
And purposely, we try to keep some of this so not one entity gets in hot water, so we do try to keep some confidentiality of how the numbers are reported.
Okay. Dave, you got some follow-ups?
Dave Vavakis, Cap. Same slide on the SRS age profile, and just looking at that 4.2% for the 18 to 24 age bracket. Did you look at that level of education in the study?
We did not.
Did not.
You got to keep in mind of the almost 12,000, Savannah River site, the big Savannah River site, is basically a city, right? You have accountants, you have procurement, you have lawyers, you have what makes up that total number is a conglomerate of a lot of different jobs. Custodians, maintenance workers. You know, what surprises people the most is there's not a lot of nuclear engineers. All right? Actually, the Savannah River site was started as a chemical plant. So it is really more chemical engineers, probably, if we were to look at that, that's just my opinion, and other engineers, but it is a chemical plant. That's why DuPont was really interested in the whole process of it. Now, I didn't get into it, but Britt heard me say, you know, the site's 310 square miles. Y'all have been on the bus tour already, right? Mm-hmm. All right, how much of the site was used from an industrial standpoint? 10%. 310 square miles is 1% of the landmass of South Carolina. 310 square miles is right under 200,000 acres. I assume y'all saw a lot of pine trees as well between this facility and that facility. It's a big, big place, but the actual industrial applications there have been quite small. But it's a big landmass to keep up with. Mike's the city manager, basically. As the landlord, he has to handle all the sewer, the water, the road conditions, you name it. That falls underneath Mike and the contractor side of that.
I actually like to think myself as the mayor in this.
Oh, the mayor. I'm sorry.
Stuart does all the work. He's the city manager.
That's very good, yeah. Mike's the mayor, Stuart McBean is the actual city manager.
AK?
Yes, regarding small businesses, I understand the numbers are significant in terms of the 115 million and also equaling to 1/3 of the procurement budgets. But I was just wondering, how does that realization meet with the objectives set by procurement in terms of trying to do business with small business?
We didn't ask that specifically, Mike can get it, but there are small business goals. As you know, there's 8A firms, there are veteran-owned small businesses. We didn't break it out into those individual performance goals. I think Mike and his group does when they look at performance-based.
We do, and I would tell you our contractors, I think pretty much set the standard for the complex in terms of engaging small business, way over their goals. About 2 times the objective in some areas for what they do.
Thank you.
Anything else from around the table? Greg?
Thank you so much. So you mentioned part of the funding comes from sales of equipment. So about how much in sales are you doing each year?
Well, it fluctuates, so I cannot give you a steady number. What is interesting is basically we do eBay sales or a yard sale.
Okay.
So we can only get as much revenue as somebody's willing to give us. So if you like have a TV and you want to put it for $100 and somebody said, I'll give you 25, you may want to take the 25. So we have a lot of items that we get from the site. You have to understand the age of the infrastructure at the site, right? It's been there a long, long time. So we get items, we've done several, every year, a little internal audit. We make between 6 and 10 cents on the acquisition dollar. All right, so we have gotten as low as 400,000 and as much as almost 1.8 million in a year. Now, the 1.8 million, we were involved in removing 10 miles of railroad at the site. We actually went on site, removed it, and then sold the rail and the ties. So it just depends upon the items that we get. Most people think, well, you can resell that stuff, everybody would want it. Well, if you're building a brand new plant, would you want to put 30-year-old stuff in a brand new plant? So you lose the liability, you lose the warranty, you lose a lot of items. So we basically are doing yard sale pricing on the items we get. And that's what people don't realize. The number that you saw, it took us 7.5 years to build up enough funds to be able to make it worthwhile to give it out. $100,000 may be a lot to me, but to an economic development agency, $100,000 is not a whole lot of money, or an academic institution. And you know, not busting any bubbles, but a lot of academic institutions, their indirect costs are pretty up there. So, and money that goes directly to, you know, grants or training or the equipment gets kind of diluted. So, but our numbers have ranged from, I'd say, 400,000 to over $1 million.
Do you actually take possession of the inventory, or you just know where it is and then
We
if
have
somebody
a-
wants it, you go out and?
No, we have a subcontractor. If you want to go to govs.deal and you want to pick up I don't know, name something that comes from the site, we list them on Gov Deals. It's basically a government eBay account. And Bolin Marketing Group, we've been working with them since I've been, and it was there 2 or 3 years, is knowledgeable on surplus equipment. He can tell me probably within a very close range, plus or minus
15%,
what that piece of equipment will sell for on the open market.
Interesting. All right, thank you so much.
Sure.
Mike?
You can't ask questions, can you?
I'm not going to ask a question. Actually, so Rick and his organization do a great job because legally the reason we can give them this material is because the law requires, or a law allows us to give equipment like this to organizations like Rick's if it would cost us more to dispose of it than we could get somebody to pay for it. So
And
it
if-
saves us a lot of money.
And if we use it for economic development purposes. That's why we only take 20%, and 80% is plowed back into workforce and economic development. We have to provide a report on how we plan on spending that money. I think we've, in our second 10-year report, I do them about every 5 years. You can't do it every year because I don't know how much they're going to get each year. So we have to build up a nest egg, and then we can tell them how we plan on spending that money.
All right, we're going to go to Phyllis and then AK.
Yes.
Oh, I was going to get Phyllis first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Phyllis Brett, the cab. How much do you know, what you may not even know, how much of the equipment that is accessed at SRS do you get?
I do not get all of it.
Right,
So
well, I know.
there is a priority list that if something comes available, it is given the opportunity for program offices at Savannah Riverside to request that before it becomes surplus. That's number one. Number two, other sites within the DOE complex can request that piece of equipment. And then they can use it for their DOE missions at Hanford or wherever they want it. The tickler is Hanford would have to come and get it and pay for the transportation. So on site, they just move it around. If it goes to Hanford, Hanford's gonna have to pay or use some of their funds to actually pay to come get it. So that's basically the way the hierarchy is set. There is some GSA involvement, government services accounting, is that right? Involved in some of selection. What we get, again, is not brand new. So,
I was just curious because long ago, I worked at Mead Hall and we got computers all the time and I didn't know how that fits in.
that's a whole different, we were never got
is
computers,
it?
yeah.
Okay.
They had a computer for schools program way back when.
Gotcha.
But they have done away with that, and we don't receive computers anymore.
Oh, gotcha, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I used to have a slide that we're the Sanford and Son of the site, but I didn't put that one up today.
All right, AK and then DeAndre.
Okay. I was just trying to be clear on what the official relationship is between the cab and, excuse me. That's an override, believe it or not. Sorry about that. But I was just trying to find out what is the official relationship, if any, between the cab and your organization, or whether it's just a resource relationship or whatever.
Well, having worked with both organizations, been involved deeply with both organizations, there's really no direct affiliation. We do not offer specific recommendations to DOE. Now, we comment, maybe DHEC's public comment period on 235F. We are one maybe of the 12 sometimes that provide comments. So I look at stuff like that, maybe a precursor or holdover from my cab days, but we do get involved in public meetings from an advocacy standpoint. We look at it more from economic development. What does it mean for jobs? Is it right for our community? Does it fit the community model? Stuff that maybe are more outside the fence, where again, y'all are more inside the fence looking at specific recommendations. But there is no direct correlation or affiliation, at least not at the government level.
All right, DeAndre?
DeAndre Davis with the CAB. Rick, thank you first of all for your professionalism with your presentation and great job on presenting and keeping us engaged in that. My question to you is centered around the impact of employment. You made the analogy about the mayor and the city administrator. What is the enticing carrot that will cause a 18 to 24-year-old to choose SRS over Aiken County or Richmond County as compared to salaries?
Well, we had a young lady, it was probably 3 years ago. She majored in chemical engineering, and I don't even know where it was at the time. But she was a chemical engineer, going back to, I said, the Savannah Riverside is basically a chemical plant when it was initially started and continues to be a lot of chemistry involved. She chose the site because she liked the challenge of having the radioactivity level or radiation involved in the chemistry, which she had a job between the oil refineries and the Savannah Riverside. And she chose the Savannah Riverside because it was more challenging. So you got challenging on one aspect. We try to convince young people that look at the national need that you're filling. You know, the Cold War is over, but look what's happening in our world today. What better place to make a difference than working at Savannah Riverside that will be involved in other defense-related missions, cleanup missions. You're worried about the environment, you're worried about climate change. All of that can be found in one location. Now, what's tricky, going back to that slide I have with the academic institutions, we have to also train the instructors, the teachers, the PhD, because they have not been involved in nuclear for how many years? So Plant Vogtle is getting ready to come online, first 2 major reactors in the last 15 years. So we're having to educate a whole group of people, not just students. We have to market to the students, make them aware of the jobs, entice them with the salary, entice them with the other things I just talked about, but we also have to get the instructors understanding that these jobs are out there.
In comparison to that, a custodian, what will make me choose to come out to SRS over working for the city of Aiken as it relates to salary comparison? Is there any studies?
We haven't done any studies on that. I mean, if I had to guess, it would be I think a lot of the contractors offer now starting 3 weeks vacation, where the city you may get 2 weeks or 1 week with 6 months. And so there's some enticement that they can do at a contractor level that the city may not be able to do.
And I just asked that question with the security level that you have to go through in order to access the site every single day compared to going to the city of Richmond or the city of Aiken that can determine whether or not I choose to go out there or stay.
Yeah, I think if we did this talk 4 years ago, there was a tremendous backlog of people getting cleared to work in areas at the site. You were actually hiring young people and they didn't get cleared for, I'd heard, 6 to 18 months. It was such a backlog. My understanding that has cleared up. Is that correct, Mike? Do you know? That it's a lot quicker than it used to be to get clearances. But yes, even the custodian has to be cleared in some areas. It's not necessarily cleared, but it's also, you have to understand that salary, what we call fitness for duty. So if you're a young man in Allendale County, what you decide to do on your Friday and Saturday nights may dictate whether you can get a job at Savannah Riverside on Monday. Okay, so they have to understand if you want this salary, you may have to sacrifice a little party time to be able to get this, because they do criminal background checks. It's not necessarily clearance to work in a classified area, but just the security to get onto the site as an employee.
DeAndre, you also make a good point. Most of them want these with them 24/7, and you can't have your phone in certain areas out there. So that does present a problem. I mean, we've had people turn down jobs because they want to be able to check Facebook 42 times a day, or not Facebook, TikTok.
And we're waiting to see how he's going to entice everybody to come back from COVID. You know, what's that old saying? You know, how you get them back on the farm after they've seen Harry? How you going to get them back on the site after they've seen telecommuting for the last year and a half and working in their bunny slippers and, you know, just wearing a shirt and no pants on the Zoom meetings? So I'm just saying, it's going to be, you know, it's going to be new for everybody, how we do that. And what will that impact the next study that if we do one, what will that look like? And what will we say about this time frame when people come back from the COVID pandemic?
All right, Charles, close it out for us.
Charles Hilton, the cab. I'm curious about your acquisition of equipment from the site. I went out on your website, and when I saw all of this, might need a little work, just as a suggestion. I did find 100 door hinges from Stanley, you know, for $15 or something, or a pH meter, but it's hard to find stuff on your site. And I'm also curious, and the reason I say that, in years past, I bought federal surplus. I ran a utility company, and I bought SRS compressors and everything else in Columbia. Does that program automatically send that stuff to you now, or some of it still going to Columbia to be sold?
Very few of it goes to Columbia. That must have been...
Oh, it's been a number of years.
Many years. So the site did do their own. Some of you that worked at the site may remember they had Saturday that you could come and buy all this stuff. But the site found there was no return on their investment. It was losing money. So now our site that you looked at is what we put up for nonprofits and government or companies as an incentive. They can get first shot before we put it on our real eBay type account. So if you want really the stuff that didn't sell that you're willing to pay money for, you go to govdeals.com and look at us there. You will see the whole list. The number that you saw on our website is the acquisition value, not our price. So that number that you saw, it's kind of like if we get a TV. Who bought a plasma TV 6 years ago? And what'd you pay? $1,500 for it? DOE would list that as what the price of that TV is, knowing good well today you're lucky to get $100 for it. So that number that you saw was not our price, that was the acquisition value. And you also need to pay attention to the condition code. So all that we list, they're surplus, they're needed repair, We list all that on our site. That is not our major sales site. So we're comfortable the way it is. So it's fine the way it is. If you want to buy something, then you go to our GovDeals account, then you can actually pay for the actual item. You can go to Holly Hill. There's walk-ins. We have a warehouse full of equipment in Holly Hill and in Snelling that you can actually go and set up a time and go through the material or buy something directly. That's another thing on our website. They get a little confused. It costs us money to get items from the Savannah River site. So a trailer, we may get a trailer, they don't give it over after 2 years. It may be 20 years. Now, how much is a 20-year-old office trailer worth? Our rule of thumb, we may get 5, we may get 8,000. Well, it costs over 3,000 just to remove it from the site. So people don't understand, this is, y'all can quote me on this, you want to write it down. If you're a nonprofit, you have to make a profit to continue to be a nonprofit. All right, we can't just give away everything without being able to have some financial management to how we run the business. So a lot of folks will want, well, I want that piece of equipment, it's free. And I go, well, no, it's not really free. We have handling fees, we have transportation fees. Are you willing to pay X? No, I don't want it. So it's just, that's what you looked at is what we list for nonprofits, what we call quality of life issues in the area. Originally, they set it up so that we could attract another Bridgestone, Firestone that may want a compressor that would make them, I don't think a compressor will make them choose us over Alabama, but I'm just saying that's, the thought process was good. It just never has worked out the way we thought it would work out on making those equipment available, at least to the industry. Sorry, not the answer you want.
All right. Thank you very much, Rick. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So I know we're running a little bit behind, but we're gonna take a break anyway. And I'm actually gonna give you a slightly longer break. We're gonna take a break until 3 o'clock, but it's contingent upon something, okay? We need to take a group photo of all the board members. So Heather, if you stand up and wave your hand for them, will you lead all the cab members out to go take a group photo, all right? The faster that y'all line up and get this done, the more break time you get out of it, right? That is an incentive for you. 3 o'clock, we're going to bring it back in, though.
Get it done. Other than that, I mean, just I got lucky that year. There in '85. They had guys come in there after I'd already worked on like 5. Crawl around, you know, everything. Right, you're like, that's hot, and then you go on aircraft carrier. Yeah. That's also when they used to build medium carrier. They had Teddy Roosevelt being opposite. He went to George Washington. She does. Subs that I saw at the shipyard broke their ballast tank with the hull door. And it turned out to I had to put Charleston 2 actual subs there. And I all broke up. So they know. Of course, we're at the shipyard, everyone wasn't that bad. Yeah, but we had so many subs came in from all refueling that year. I was like a logical engineer, I was in charge of making sure that whoever else was doing the survey. Occasionally, that was probably close to my whole career. That was like 50. We had to do a cross survey. Okay, yeah, this pipe is this. It would make more sense. That story.
It was actually.
Well, only the veterans got to go out one of the sea trials, one of us would go out to. That was like kind of down on the list. So these, you're never getting, you're just rolling from side to side. You're under. We haven't got it. It's not encumbered. Oh.
Bert, how you doing?
Glad we heard we got 235F. Now we can find some money and do decommissioning, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, no, no. No, it's not. You need to fix that one.
I know, I mean, I was thinking.
They can find somebody else to put on it. I wish they could. Come back and help us. Really wish that she
I know, if I could, like, can we,
Yeah.
like, I don't know.
Exactly.
This is all everything that he used to have in the agency. So good luck with your new job. Well, I had a lapse because I had a situation.
Or improved college, how about that? New improved college. This is. Give it time. Not that this is the only thing. Fire. Fire. A lot going on. A lot of people are native. Just the sounding. You get fully immersed.
And I just don't know why. And when we lowered the, you know, in the industry, you know, nobody talks about money side. And so standard was a small work.
Some people almost heard me. 2-minute warning, everybody.
And I said,
get you the.
When they question stuff like that time, I said, I got to clear those all the things. I don't care about you. I care a lot about her. Do I want to harm someone?
Yeah. Have almonds, apples, oranges, blueberries, grapes, and all of those. Yeah? Oh, yeah. But my cheat thing is my dark chocolate, right? I tell myself it's good for me. I put it in my almonds and I bring it to work.
All right, everybody, let's find our seats. It's 3 o'clock. I gave you an extra 5 minutes. It's time to pay the piper. Is anybody else outrageously hot, or is it just me? Is it hot in here? Oh my God. Jerry's fine though. Okay. Up next, we have the start of the rest of our afternoon, which sounds ominous, but really isn't. We're going to load into the budget update presentation. Derek Watkins is going to give some background on that, and then give us a little bit of head start on talking about the budget priorities letter. After he gets done, we get his Q&A through, then what we'll do is we'll take a pause, we'll ask for public comment. After that, then we'll go into drafting the budget priorities letter for FY 2024. All of you got a draft of that in your email. You had a chance to take a look at it. You saw the highlighted portion. That's mostly what we're going to be working on. We're going to put that letter up on the screen after public comment, and we'll start editing from there. And we'll go around the table. We'll see what needs to be included, what needs to be taken out, if we need to add anything new, and where we sit across the board. Any questions about what we are doing this afternoon? Seeing none. Derek, take it away, sir.
Hey, good afternoon. So I'm just going to let you know right off the bat that I know my predecessor, I saw that he did his presentation. It only took an hour and 36 minutes. All right, you guys are going to be disappointed. Derek's not going to talk for an hour and 36 minutes. I'm a bit more of a Reader's Digest kind of person. And several of the things I was going to cover between questions asked and Mike's presentation, a lot of it was already discussed. So this may go really quick. Now, inevitably, you're going to ask questions. You're going to ask some really good questions. And I'm not going to know the answer to some of those. But fortunately, I've got Bruce Martin and Pat Petty and Zach Todd. And in terms of 5-card stud, this is what you would call my 3 aces I'm holding. So we're going to kick it off real quick. Purpose. The only thing that's really important about the purpose here is what you guys want. So when we say saving the best for last, we're going to say the best for last. And I'm not talking about me. I saw that this takes between 15 to 20 minutes to discuss. I'm not going to spend 15 to 20 minutes on it. Here's what's really important here. We're in FY 22 right now. And so FY 22, hey, that's that inner circle. Well, if you go out 1 year, that would have been the prior year, those activities were taking place. And going back to FY 20, when you see about the out-year planning and program budget development and coming on back around, that was for this fiscal year. So right now, we're working on out-year planning, we're talking about 24. So this is the federal budget planning process. Some call it the vicious cycle. And really what's not, what you don't see here, you'll see this on the internet. I've seen it, a few variations, but they all basically tell you the same thing. What usually affects all this is execution. And so execution, of course, is impacted by many things, such as the pandemic that we are all very familiar with, and work stoppages, and price of utilities going up. It all affects it. But there's a lot of people in this room that are involved in the budget planning process, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Key takeaway from these slides here is that, well, as Mike mentioned, that for FY22, the enacted is $10 million more than the request, which is good news for Savannah River, and $6 million of that specifically for PILT, give or take a few $100,000. But chart on the right, you'll look and say, hey, Savannah River gets the largest portion of the EM total funding. But really, you got to look at Richland, Hanford, and River Protection. That's one really budget control point. So they actually get the most, but between that budget control point, Savannah River, that's over half the total EM budget. So then we get into the request, and I'm going to go take a peek at my notes because I can tell you right now it's not nearly as riveting as it looks. But having said that, I think y'all have all been provided the EM mission statement. Is key to complete the safe cleanup environmental legacy brought about by the decades of nuclear weapons development, government-sponsored nuclear energy research. And as part of that, you have your different priorities. And first priority listed is achieve significant construction milestones. And you've already heard Mr. Buddy mention Advanced Manufacturing Collaborative, which is listed up there. And thankfully, he's already covered really what I was going to talk about it. But once again, we're going to save a little bit of time here and not regurgitate the same information. Now, where does the bulk of our budget go at the Savannah River side on the environmental management side? And you'll see liquid waste program. That gets the lion's share, roughly 56%, give or take. And so you go back to the talking about construction milestone priorities, and for example, is complete all complete all concrete placements for SDU non-river projects. Priority number 2, execute key cleanup projects. And so we're going to treat 4+ million gallons of tank waste at Savannah River. This all ties back into the liquid waste program. So, PBS, program baseline summaries. For the Grizzly veterans of the CAB, you've heard PBS before, you know what that means. For the new members of CAB, you might not know what we're really talking about here. So if I'm going to say something that you already know, please don't be offended. But for those who maybe don't know, but when we talk about PBS, think of it as a bucket of money. It's dedicated to a specific mission that appropriate dollars go into to complete that mission work. This here provides the list of the different PBSs. And you'll see, for example, when we talk about saltstone disposal unit number 7, you'll see that line item number there. And that's where you will have like a construction manager specifically for that line item. So here, all priority scopes in each PBS are grouped to one of 4 categories. These are going to be reoccurring themes. But the very first item there, when you see that, think what the term is called men's safe. And so you'll see that there's like 4 priorities. Well, I'm sorry, there's 4 different categories for each of these. But one thing we're going to do before any budgetary dollar spent, we're going to be at least men's safe level. Next is operational support. And for example, they even specifically mention the CAB, APA, and DHEC and those support activities. Then get to cleanup activities, meet compliance milestones and commitments. I can promise you, you all heard about the DOE acronyms, CERCLA, RCRA, FFA. Yeah, I didn't know what any of those were until I came to work for the Department of Energy. I came from DOD, and we had our own, a few thousand acronyms. I got to learn a bunch more once I came here. But then number 4 drives a lot of why we're here today. That's that making progress in other EM mission activities. And so, like I said, no matter what, we're going to be men safe. Then you got these other things we must do. And then we go to these priorities that go about accomplishing that other mission work, or what we call making progress. Mention how there are some recurring themes across the different PBSs, and you'll see it right there. So once again, why are we here? We're here to get your input for the fiscal year 24 priorities. And so if you're like me, if you sleep, you might forget. Let's just go to what your priorities were last year. So based on last year, it was I'm not sure what it says, 23 priorities, but anyway, it was liquid waste program, nuclear materials, accelerated deactivation, decommissioning 235F, and common and program infrastructure across entire SRS complex to be addressed down to PBS levels.
So if I could just clarify, Derek, the reason it's 23 is because that's the budget that we were formulating.
Yep.
So this year we'll be looking for 24.
Yep. And she has to keep me honest because, I have to tell you guys, I'm an accountant by trade. I've been dabbling on this side now for about 5 weeks. So a little new to the position, but yeah, you're 100% right. Goes back to that very first slide that I kind of went through that had the pinwheel of the budget cycle process. Now, I know that there's going to be questions because I went through that really quick.
All right. Who has questions for Derek? Bobby, let's start with you. You don't even have to stand it up all the way. Oh, can you grab that microphone for me? Thank you.
On the fiscal year 22 request, I see that the the pension hasn't changed.
Okay.
What's the status on it?
Okay, so the pension's actually a really good news story. The actuaries are saying, hey, by fiscal year 25, that liability will come down to 0. So we're still paying the request there, and we've received support from the current administration, past administration, to do those accelerated payments at a higher level than above the ERISA minimum. So we're not at the finish line yet, but we've definitely made good progress.
Dave.
Dave Vavagas, CAB. In the past, the pension was always embedded in each of the PBSs, and this year it looks like it's broken out separately. What's the reason for that?
Okay, so this is when I'm look at my 3 aces to give a better answer. And I know my boss Bruce there, he's already hopping up.
Hi, I'm Bruce Martin, CFO. The reason why we wanted to go a different approach this year is to pull the pensions out of the overhead accounts that were affecting all the programs. Plus, this gives us more visibility as to what the overall pension liability or contribution requirement is for each program. Whereas previously, you weren't going to see that information.
Right, that's contrary to what you wanted in the past, though, correct?
We wanted more flexibility in the past because we weren't quite sure what the overall requirement was going to be, because it's a timing issue. When the pension management plan comes out versus when we were putting in our budget, there's a significant delay there. So we always wanted to make sure that we had flexibility, that in case we weren't going to get all the required funding we had requested, we could still adjust. But this way, or the approach now that we're trying to utilize, since we only have until FY25 before the liability is done, we figured now was an opportune time to make that switch. And plus, we were getting a lot of interest from Congress to support this as well.
Okay.
And we also switched to having a levelized funding. Before, the pension would go up and down based on what the report said each year that we would owe for the pension. We both accelerated and went to a level number for planning purposes, and that made it easier to pull out as a separate line item, because now we didn't need that flexibility anymore. We knew every year going down the line what exactly we were going to pay.
And I'll stick with, I haven't heard James mention this yet, but he usually has a two-question rule, so I'll stick with that. The budget request said that you wanted to get a hazmat fire response truck. What is that for?
I don't have a good answer for that. I would say it's for a hazmat fire. Not to be redundant there. I was about to say that the person I would normally look at for that particular item is not actually in this room.
I imagine it's, I haven't looked at that particular issue, but we do refurbish our emergency response vehicles on a regular basis. So I'm sure we're just refurbishing vehicles. And we do, in addition to what Rick was talking about earlier, as we retire our vehicles out of service, we do donate those to local emergency response activities.
What PBS does that fall into? You know?
I would think it would be 20 under safeguard and security.
I was thinking so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jim?
Yeah, in, the real world, there are things that happen and things that don't happen. What restraints are you under as far as being able to use funds from, say, one PBS to apply to work that's accomplished in a different one? Is that at the PBS level, or is there some other level?
Depends. First of all, was it all under the same appropriation? Or if it's one in which you may have like Cat B restrictions, then, that will prevent you from going from one to the other. So yes, there's flexibility depending on what the particular scenario is, but it's not carte blanche on the other hand.
Yeah, is there any kind of general rule of thumb for people to follow?
Well, first of all, when these kind of questions come up, the general discussion is, first of all, okay, what appropriation are we talking about? And then we will go back, take a look and say, yes, we can do this, or no, we can't.
Okay, thank you.
So in other words, one of those, ask and we will do our research to make sure before we give good advice or bad advice.
Yeah, one thing, one of our experts corrected me that that hazmat vehicle would come out of indirects, so it's not ascribed to a single PBS to fund that thing. And I have to step out for a few minutes, so please ask Thomas all the hard questions while I'm gone. I mean, it's his last chance here, come on.
Charles, I saw you starting to put your card up.
I know when we wrote this letter last year, Charles Hilton cab, it was an unusual year. I think there were 6 members and we were meeting on the computer or something.
What's weird about that?
Thank God we're not doing that anymore. I've always been concerned about the operations of H Canyon.
Okay.
It is, to me, one of the most important facilities we have down there. Now, we broadly address it in liquid waste programs, which is kind of everything, and nuclear materials. I thought in the past we had addressed H Canyon specifically, the operations. We may not have. Where would that fall in the PBSs, or where do we actually specifically hit that thing? It gets rid of our
11.
all those fuel rods down there that we've taken from the whole world.
Bert Crap says PBS 11.
11.
Pat Petty's nodding yes. There are a lot of yeses around the room, so yeah, PBS 11. But that's what brings up an interesting,
Bless you.
an interesting point that I kind of like to make now as we start to transition into letter writing in a little while. There's always this tendency to want to try and write this letter in their terms and the department's terms. I don't necessarily feel that we need to be limited by that. If we don't know what a PBS is, let them figure it out. You know that you want H Canyon funded, right? You don't have to care what the PBS is. That's what you put in the letter. You can write it as a program. You can write the specific topics that you want. Don't feel obligated to put things in their terms. Put it in the terms that you understand, and then let them figure it out later, right? All right, sorry. Step off my soapbox for a second. Any other questions from around the table? Remember, I mean, the more we engage with this material, the more that we understand. Repetition builds familiarity. So if we have any other further questions, now would be a great time. Greg.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Derek, for the briefing. So how have there been changes in priorities with the new administration versus the previous administration? If so, has it given SRS some different opportunities, different challenges? Can you speak to that a little bit in terms of the effects basically of the new administration?
Well, as of right now, it has not created any changes for us. The priorities have not changed. So you gave me an easy question to answer.
Okay, excellent. So we're going from an extremely conservative Republican administration to a progressive Democratic administration, and you're saying the priorities have not changed?
Not for us.
Okay.
That's
very interesting.
Yeah, not speaking for the rest of the complex.
Okay.
But
All right.
What kind of affects that, though, too, is what sort of missions you have at each site.
Okay. All righty, thank you.
All right, any other questions around the table for Derek? Going once, going twice. All right, thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
Well, I want to thank everyone for being here today.
Thanks, Derek.
James, I do want to respond to Greg. So the overall priorities for the site, Greg, hasn't changed, but there are other things that are happening because of this administration. For example, with respect to like electric vehicles and things related to the climate, those kinds of things are happening.
Can I get you to speak a little more direct? Sorry.
With respect to things like electric vehicles, those kinds of things are happening at the site. We have a plan to bring in a large number of electric vehicles over the next few years. I think this first year we're looking at bringing in on the order of about 60 or so electric vehicles, and that eventually will grow to pretty much replace the entire fleet that we have on site, which would get us on the order of about 450 or so. So there are those kinds of changes that are happening, but from a general mission for the site, nothing significant. And Amy's reminding me one other priority. I mean, some of the things that we do is with the Justice 40 program. So, but we are already doing a lot of work on the environmental justice side of things. But with respect to the overall budget number for the site, we don't foresee any significant changes there.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I mean, I was thinking, and one of the things I was thinking about was the environmental justice program for building up to 40% of the spending and those sorts of things. So I was thinking there had to be some effect, but I guess I'm glad to hear that it's not dramatic in some way.
Yeah, but Derek reminded you he was an accountant, so he looks at that number. And so that
Yeah.
bottom line number for the site isn't changing significantly, but there are
Sure.
some changes within the various programs.
Sure. Thank you very much.
All right, I'm just thinking about the implications of partisan-based cleanup, and that's really what, okay. Anyway, so up next would be our public comment period. And for everyone's benefit, just to let you know, public comment usually precedes any kind of debate before the board. And it's because I want to give the public a chance to influence you, more or less. If someone in the community has a comment that they want to make, they want you to be thinking in a certain direction, we put public comment in front of our real work of drafting recommendations, drafting this letter, just to give them that opportunity. Tomorrow, you're going to notice the same thing. Public comment's going to occur before voting, again, for that very same reason, so that if a member of the public does feel strongly, they have the opportunity to express that to you, which may or may not factor into how you decide to vote on things. That being said, there are no names signed up for public comment today, but since Rick McLeod is technically a member of the public, I'm going to ask if there is any public comment that anybody would like to make and did get a chance to sign up. Thanks, Rick. Moving on.
No comment. But I would make the board needs to be aware of not just the budget that Thomas and Amy and Mike have put out, but you need to pay attention to the infrastructure money. Some of us around for the Recovery Act, which was $31 billion. Remember, I just told you it was a $2.2 billion impact. It's $62 billion is DOE's cut of the infrastructure money. When I say DOE, energy-related programs, not necessarily the site-related programs. So that's going to flow down to the state, local communities, local governments to spend that money. And I know we would all love to be in that position. It's very difficult to spend $62 billion in a 5-year period, and that's what they're looking at. So you may be hearing about electric vehicles and other things. So those are the types of things that may be outside the budget but may impact the site. So the CAB should be aware of some of those things.
Thanks, Rick. All right. Up next is our budget priority letter. This is what we've been leaning towards all day. This is where we're going to draft our letter, or your letter, to the department on what their priorities should be for 2024. Now, a few words of caution. Sometimes there's a tendency to want to look at the dollar amounts assigned and try to infer some degree of importance on that. You know, a spark plug is cheap, but your car doesn't start without it, right? Spark plug's real important until you don't have one. Same thing here. The dollar value assigned to a budget line item may not necessarily fit with where you think the priority would be. So if you think something is the most important activity on site, you want to make sure that it's listed and make sure it's funded, then that's what we're going to list first, right? Regardless of how much money is actually attached to it. Any questions before we get started? Okay. As we go into this, in regard to all environmental management mission activities, recommended priorities are as follows. And liquid waste program is listed first, including the saltstone disposal units. Does anybody have any questions or comments about this letter as it exists, directions that you feel like we need to go? Everybody all at once. Dave, yeah, always good for a budget talk. Yes.
Dave Vavakis, CAB. And I would like to, if we could add to that, just continuing to ramp up SWPF along with that.
How would we frame that in terms of budget priorities? Like just making sure that SWPF is funded?
Well, just with after the liquid waste program, continuing to ramp up SWPF and the SD.
Including the saltstone units and
correct.
The continued ramp up of SWPF. So maybe at the end of here, just add and the continued ramp up of SWPF. Does that cause anybody any kind of qualms? Is there any, like, no, I don't want this here? Everybody's just very agreeable to this today. Jim, I saw yours first. Let's go to your card.
Okay, what I was looking at was nuclear materials.
Okay.
And my concern with that is it's just too broad. It doesn't really direct things. And I would suggest that we consider adding to nuclear materials the requirement that storage activities be funded and that the downblending of plutonium be specifically stated.
Okay. You want to do another hyphen like we did for nuclear waste?
Yeah, we can follow the same format.
Let's do that. We'll put a hyphen. And then, so to include storage of spent nuclear fuel.
Oh, no, nuclear material.
Nuclear material, okay.
Okay. And then the plutonium downblending.
And the plutonium downblending. Any heartburn over that? Anybody feel like we don't need to list it like that, or feel like it should be listed differently? I see your card, Charles. I want to get you that next after we hit this. Okay. Charles?
Charles Hilton Cab. I want to go back up to liquid waste.
Yeah.
From what the reports that I've heard from Mr. Budney, and Mr. Johnson can help with this, I understand the saltstone disposal units, we're ahead of schedule, under budget, we're in wonderful shape on those, more or less. Why put them in there if the program's going great? I'm more concerned about continued SWPF. I think we're too broad with this letter. It's kind of like, you know, the world's wonderful and I think we need to be specific. And I think this is a place where we can possibly take out saltstone disposal units.
How does the group feel about that? Did anyone agree with removing the saltstone disposal units, the SDUs? I'm going to start using SDU now because we've said it a bunch.
I don't agree with that.
You don't agree? Well, let's talk about it, Dave.
What do you've got to have that, that's a big piece of the pie from SWPF to get to the SDUs, right?
I agree, but haven't we been told that those things are well under construction, that they're under budget, preliminary design time, and getting us to where we need to be with them? We're way ahead of schedule. That's been one of the perfect projects that we've had down there, it seems to me. And we're way ahead of the program.
What would DOE's plan, talk about the big picture here. DOE's plan for reducing and mitigating one of the greatest environmental risks in the state of South Carolina is emptying those waste tanks and treating and safely disposing the radioactive waste. So the SDUs are a big part of that.
I totally agree, but I understand that and I asked the DOE folks, am I wrong on this, or isn't that program, from what the reports that we've had, we're there. We're still building the things, but we're way out in front of the 8 ball, and we're also, we're under budget on those things now.
All right, so Jim's
going to answer.
I'm here if you need to. Okay. We're already started filling on SDU 6. And so, Charles, you're right in that we have others that are under construction. But the thing that we want to remind folks of is that when SWPF and one of the things that you have is ramping up SWPF, and it gets to the 6 million gallons per year, or that we have production in excess of that, it takes us about 18 months to fill each of the SDUs, but it takes us a little over 2 years to construct it. And so our plan was always to have these things constructed and ready to go, because once SWPF comes into operation at its capacity, we don't want to have to throttle it back because we don't have SDUs available. Tim?
No, he was nodding his head steadily through all that. He's like, yep.
I'm looking. I'm looking at my notes, I think 388,000 is what we've run through SWP this year, which, you know, and I know that the number is supposed to be 6 million at some future date. When are we going to get to that number? And I know we don't really know that, but I see the gradual ramping, and I'm thrilled. If anybody's thrilled with what we're doing in liquid waste, it's me. But I'm just concerned with the language that we've got. Let's do everything with the.
We can keep this going. I think I saw some cards go up because of this, and so maybe we can hit some of these other comments, and if they don't address it, we'll come back, okay? Phyllis, I saw yours, and then Candace. That's yours? Okay, yeah. Phyllis, we'll do you first.
I was just going to say, maybe I still don't understand exactly how all this works, but in my view and my understanding of how government operations work, if you take it off the list, then somewhere down the line, somebody's going to say, well, they don't care about this so much, so we can backpedal on how important that is in our list. It seems to me you just got to keep it out there.
Okay. Candace.
My comment was along the same lines. I don't see the harm in leaving it there. I do see the harm in taking it out.
Okay. Dave?
And Charles, you were talking about the budget, and I don't want to get into an arcane discussion here, but if you look at the construction of saltstone disposal units 10, 11, and 12, in the FY21 budget, in the enacted, it was $562 million. That, at least in the final bill, from what I saw, that jumped up to $19,500,000 in 2022. So that's how much funding has got to continue to increase for those SDUs.
All right, Dave, I believe that number you're referring to should have been 562,000 for that first fiscal year.
500, you're correct, I'm sorry. 560. And 19,500,000, I'm sorry.
Okay. We've heard, yeah, Greg.
Thanks. Regarding this point, I guess I have a different perspective on it. I guess I don't really care how many SDUs they build. I care that they close tanks and reduce the risk. So if you left it up to me, it would say, including making sure to close tanks and reducing risk, and leave it up to them to figure out they need to build more SDUs or do more with SWPF or one of those things. So that's just my non-technical perspective on it. I would say close tanks.
Well, that's a fun tact. Does anybody agree with what Greg was saying? I like that. Yeah, we just change it to closed tanks and let them, you like that, Charles? That's where we're going with. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. It should all be on already.
This is just a general comment. When you're talking about SDUs, as far as tank closure is concerned, that is one of the latest, initiatives. So you don't want to take that off and just say close tanks, because we've been closing tanks for years, and to be quite honest, we haven't closed that many tanks. So when we have a new process or a new way we're going to do it, and it's out front, and it has not been proven over time yet for how many we need, that does need to stay in the forefront.
Okay.
It's like out of sight, out of mind.
So here's what I'm going to do. Why don't we just take a quick straw poll? I'm not really going to count. But yeah, Dave, you want to get something in first?
Yeah, I like the detail because there's separate line items in the budget. So
that's a good point too. Jim, y'all are doing everything but what I want to do. It's fine.
One small thing that will change the emphasis is we get rid of the word including and say especially. It prioritizes the items that we want to prioritize.
Okay. How do we feel about that? Anybody got any heartburn about changing from including to especially? You probably do that in both of them, in liquid waste and nuclear materials.
Yeah, both.
Everybody agree with that one? Just give me a little nod, shake. Yeah. All right, let's change including to especially. Narinder?
I have a question. I don't know how somebody will take it. We are building storage areas. My question is, why, when the tank is clean, why wouldn't we put grout in that, which we build at saltstones to reduce the volume of creating another landfill?
Okay. You have that, Jim?
Jim Folk, DOE. The main issue there is you don't have the infrastructure to take that grout from saltstone otherwise. But the main issue with it is that you don't have the infrastructure to go back from the saltstone facility, take that grout back into the tanks. It's actually much less efficient to try to put that material back in the tanks.
I think it might cost hundreds of millions of dollars building a new unit, and you can spend about $30–40 million to build a transfer line to tank farms.
Again, the difficulty in making that transfer line, doing that transfer line is going to likely be a lot more expensive than what you're talking about. You got to remember, each of these tanks has a volume of about 1 million gallons, right? In a single SDU, I have 32 million gallons of space. So I only have 43 tanks to go to close. That would only offset one SDU with all the infrastructure costs that would be involved. So it's much more efficient. That's why we went to the large SDU to begin with, much more efficient to dispose of large quantities into the 7 SDUs that we'll require.
All right, so back to our letter. Let's take a quick straw poll. Just if you can give me a thumbs up if you want to leave the SDUs in. We'll just go around. Yep. Dave, we got yours? I mean, I'm seeing a majority. How do you feel? We okay with letting this one go? We'll let it go. All right, moving on. Any other comments about this letter? How do we sit? Steve?
Small one, but I think it's ramp up of salt waste.
Yes.
Oh, ramp up of, yep. All right, thanks. Jerry?
Jerry Mossbarger, Cab. I have a major concern about the South Carolina Congress's desire to send the majority of the money to the Port of Charleston. I don't know if anybody else has followed that. And I think that's totally inappropriate, especially since we here locally incur most of the risk. So I would like to have something in this letter about...
This letter's going to the federal government, not to the state, though.
So we shouldn't put anything in the federal government letter about...
You can, but the federal government, I don't think, gets to determine that for the state.
This is FY24.
And it's FY24 money anyway.
Oh, 24 money, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
AK? Speaking to the microphone a bit more for me. Just pull it to you.
All right, thank you. AK Hassan Cab. I just want to ask information, and I don't know whether that would stimulate some addition or deletion or whatever, because it's very brief anyway. But the accelerated deactivation of the decommissioning of 235F, I believe that's where we were doing the very sensitive work in the small boxes of kind of removing highly radioactive materials, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just trying to find out where we are in that process, and understanding that may help me to understand where that issue needs to be regarding our letter, et cetera.
That project's still ongoing, isn't it, Bert? Yeah. Bert?
Yeah. Bert Krapps with DOE. The 235F, we're doing deactivation right now. Expect to finish that up this calendar year. So that would be, the next step would be decommissioning. So for 24, you'd be talking about decommissioning the facility. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Marcia. Can I get you to speak into the microphone?
Just doesn't flow to me. Perhaps ramping up the operations of the salt waste processing facility? It says ramp up, and I'm right back, I'm sorry, back at liquid waste.
It's okay. I say continuing the ramp.
Continue and continue ramping up, or this doesn't flow? Maybe ramping up the operations of the facility?
Yeah, that's fine. You know what? And ramping up how about this? After ramping up solid waste processing facility operations. Just, yeah, and leave it there. Yeah, correct.
Now, see, you reopened it. I was going to let it go.
I know.
So what if we just stuck on the end of the liquid waste program statement there to expedite tank closure and risk reduction?
In order to?
Yeah, just say whatever you got up there.
Operations.
Yeah, ramping up salt waste production.
Heather, in order
to
expedite. Yeah, sorry, one person at a time, and I'll let Greg do it because it's him. No. So, in order to, right where your cursor is, hit the space bar, and then, in order to expedite the, oh God, I already lost it, tank closure.
In order to expedite tank closure and risk reduction.
Tank closure and risk reduction. AK, you still got another question? Oh. It's not easy to be typing on a screen where everybody can critique the speed with which you do it. So, Heather, please, thank you. We do appreciate everything you're doing. Dave?
If we're going to expand on that, should we say something, also include something about the environmental risk? I mean, that's huge.
Would you want just environmental in front of risk reduction? Yeah. Okay. So in front of risk, put in environmental. Yes, Ron.
James, I was just going to say, I know this is a recommendation going to the department, but you might want to get rid of the in front of the tank because you're talking more than one tank closure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, yeah, right here. That one, between expedite and tank.
Yep.
Super fun to type when everybody's watching you. Yes, Ronna.
Ron O'Brien, CAB. DHEC and EPA and DOE probably can concur or disagree with what I'm about to say, but inherent in tank closure is environmental risk reduction and stewardships, because it's all a part of that plan.
Yeah.
So you may not have to add those words at all, since the main parts that are tied in together are the salt waste facility operations and tank closure. Those are like, I don't want to say married, but they're...
No, I mean, I understand the point. Personally, I agree. I think that environmental is embedded in, but I also appreciate wanting to address it specifically. Dave? Did you have some?
Yeah, I was jumping down to the 235F.
Okay.
I think that line should be removed. Mike Budney told us in his remarks that it was going to be complete in calendar year 22 and shut down and go dark. And if I look at the budget,
That'll be the deactivation part, not the decommissioning.
right? But if I look at the budget, they had 5.6 million in FY21. They're down to, the request for FY22 is 1.2 million. So I'm sure that by 24, it's going to be much lower than that.
So that depends, right? I mean, does anybody want to stick up for 235F and leaving in the decommissioning of it as a part of the CAB's priorities? Okay, no one wants to stick up for it.
We'd like to stick up for it.
We can't give you a number, today for the decommissioning, but when we move into decommissioning, you should expect that number to be considerably different than what you saw the last year for deactivation.
Costs a lot more money to turn off the power than it does to fill it up full of grout.
No, it costs a lot more money to fill it up with
Oh,
grout
yeah,
than it
I
does to
inversed
turn
it.
off the power.
I may have had a mild stroke a minute ago, just, reversing everything, it's fine. Okay, any other questions or comments about the letter where we stand? Given that, does anybody want to stick up for leaving 235F in?
The decommissioning, are we going to separate decommissioning from deactivation?
We can get rid of deactivation and just leave accelerated decommissioning.
Yeah, okay.
Feel better about that? Getting rid of, that takes care of the phrasing. What Dave brought up to us is that activity, the deactivation will be done. And so we're listing activities that will actually be completed at the time or being worked on. Okay. Any other thoughts about this letter? AK?
No, I just wanted to comment and just say that's why I brought it up in the first place. I felt that depending on where we were in that process, that it would change the priority and whatnot. And so that has shifted and been hashed out. But I just wasn't sure, absent information.
I understand. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, question.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Are we accelerating the decommissioning of 235F, or are we just decommissioning 235F?
The entire process is accelerated, isn't it? I'm looking for somebody to nod at me. Yeah, Bert's saying yes, it is. So if we were to follow the standard process, it would be a different speed at which it's occurring. Not that all the steps aren't being done. I don't want to imply that at all. This goes back to that board of presentations in March of 2019 when they covered that in depth. Yes, Charles.
Charles Hilton, Cab. I'm still a little bit concerned too about, as a citizen of Aiken County, I think we're most concerned about those tanks and the liquid storage and the fuel rods that come into this state from all over the world. I mean, we're the dumping ground for those fuel rods. And we still don't have anything in there about H Canyon. And H Canyon is where we're going to get rid of those fuel rods. Originally, part of the fuel rods were supposed to go to Idaho, the national lab somewhere. Politics is not going to allow that. I don't know if we started up the electrolytic whatever at the H Canyon to be able to process those rods. But I would really like to see something in there about the continued strong support of H Canyon. It's all kind of, I'm just concerned the whole thing is really, really, really broad, and we don't have anything, we're not even addressing the last place that we've got to get rid of those rods, H Canyon.
Okay. Where do you want to add it? I guess in that nuclear materials line.
Go back to accelerated decommissioning of 235. We've done that. Maybe we could take that out.
Well, the deactivation, yeah, but the decommissioning is separate.
Nothing in that building concerns the county citizens, I don't think. I am really worried about those fuel rods and the liquid waste. If we're going to put a priority in there, the continued funding of H Canyon for the decommissioning of the fuel rods or whatever you call it, getting rid of those fuel rods, all of them.
I mean, you could even do especially H Canyon operations, comma, the storage of nuclear materials, comma, and plutonium downblending.
I can take that.
Yeah. Okay. Dave?
Yeah, James, I agree with Charles that H Canyon is important, but if I look at the budget for, FY20, FY21, FY22, it's even down almost $5 million in FY22 from where it was in FY21, and so it's been pretty stable. It's not like they need additional budget dollars to run H Canyon. So I'm just wondering, do we need to include it in this letter?
So let's clarify. This isn't necessarily asking for additional budget dollars. This is, if you have a set pot of money, what do you spend first? I mean, think about your household budget. You're going to pay your mortgage, right? That's going to come out the top, most likely. Then you've got your other things. As that pot dwindles down, what's left? So where are your priorities in your bills? This isn't about, trying to assign additional funding to it. Just want to make that, small little clarification.
Well, if you make it a priority, you're asking for additional funding, I mean, in a sense, correct?
Not necessarily. I make a priority about the weed killer in my garage, but but I'm not spending a fortune on it. Maybe I should. I got a lot of weeds. How do we feel about this as a group? Where do we want to take it? Some of y'all look done.
I'm fine with including the H. Canyon reference.
Okay. Greg?
Charles, is it the operations or is it the maintenance? It seems like you're also concerned about the maintenance.
I think it's both. I think the operations.
Yeah, because it's a unique facility.
It is a unique facility in this country.
So we want to be able to maintain it and operate it.
Okay, so H. Canyon maintenance and operations.
Something along those lines.
We like a lot of clauses. Yes, Phyllis. Sorry, I said that really quietly. Yes, Phyllis.
I have a question. I don't know whether this is of any concern, but looking at the last thing about pilot, I was wondering if one of the things that we might also want to say, at least somewhere down the line, is how important it is for us, for the federal government, to find a permanent repository for all those things that keep getting dumped in South Carolina.
Permanent repository is owned by a completely different office. That's the Office of Nuclear Energy. Please, somebody nod at me. Yes. So that's not an EM.
That was part of my question. Yeah. Is that even under our
purview? That's not an EM project. Okay. Dave?
I would be in favor of moving infrastructure up to the very top as the most important thing on the list. And here's why I'm saying that. When I look at the DOE's budget request for fiscal year 22, they're saying that the deteriorating infrastructure has increasingly resulted in reduced operational capability and higher repair or replacement costs. As a result, cannibalization of parts, costly piecemeal maintenance, temporary modifications, and in some cases workarounds have been performed to sustain functional performance of many facilities, equipments, and systems. These practices have resulted in an excessive, expensive, and inefficient utilization of resources and increased the cost of future capital infrastructure investment.
Before we move on to that, because I agree, infrastructure, I mean, if you don't have a road, it doesn't really matter, right? Last year, one of the things that the board did is, you notice the numbers are gone. It used to be a numbered list. The board members who were working on this last year removed those numbers, is not to try to imply any kind of importance over it, but to say all of these are our priorities in no particular order. That was done on purpose to convey that aspect. Now we can put it back, we can reorder it. I mean, we'll do anything that you guys want to do. Does anybody agree with Dave about moving it? Do you want to keep it like this and it's no particular order? What do you want to do?
I agree with Dave.
Yeah, I bet you do, man. Anybody disagree with Dave or anybody agree with Dave? Phyllis?
Whether you like it or not, if it's a list, everybody's going to assume that number one is number one. So,
yeah,
even if it doesn't have a number.
All right, what do you want to do? Do you want to move it?
I'm okay with that. I don't care. Sorry.
I love that. It does matter, but I don't, whatever. Does anybody actually care?
Yeah, I think we have to avoid the probability that the liquid waste program gets second place. I think that has to remain first, no matter how you want to reorder the rest of the elements. But that one has to stand alone at the beginning.
Okay. So what about moving infrastructure to above nuclear materials. How do we feel about that? Some head nods in either direction would be helpful. Yeah? Okay. Heather, why don't we move the common program infrastructure to above nuclear materials? Greg, you've got your hand on the mic.
Yeah, I'm fine moving it up. I would not move it up above nuclear materials. How about moving it above accelerated decommissioning of 235?
Okay. Are we good with that as a group? Yeah.
It's kind of a
lot more head
compromise.
nods with that. Okay.
There we go.
So we'll put, there we go. Anything else? Dave, you still got your card up?
Yes.
You've still got
And,
stuff?
So we're moving on to payment in lieu of taxes, Bill.
Can you microphone for me, please?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Dave Wabakis, Cab, sorry. Let me start by saying that I'm not asking you to support PILT, and that I'm not asking you to oppose PILT. I am suggesting that payment in lieu of taxes does not have a place, should not be included in the SRS CAB IPL letter. Some background. The Payment in lieu of Taxes Act was passed by Congress in 1976 to provide payments to local governments and counties where certain federal lands are located within their boundaries. PILT is based on the concept that these local governments incur costs associated with maintaining infrastructure on federal lands within their boundaries, but are unable to collect taxes on these lands. Thus, they need to be compensated for these losses in revenues. Since 1977, funds here are distributed to 3 South Carolina counties, Aiken, Allendale, and Barnwell, where the Savannah River site was built. Barnwell receives the most funds. So PILT funds have supported such local services as education, infrastructure, and emergency response. Numerous elected officials have called PILT a sacred cow. Now, annually, the Department of Energy sends a budget request to Congress. We've talked about that many times today. DOE requests funding for the saltstone disposal units, K area, H area, L area, on and on. DOE even requests funding for the Citizens Advisory Board for us. Wouldn't you believe that if DOE felt that PILT was important, that it would request funding from Congress? Well, perhaps surprisingly, DOE made no request for funding for PILT in its fiscal year 2022 budget. How about fiscal year 2021? No, again, no request for PILT funding. When we go back to 20, the same case. In Mr. Watkins' backup slides, which he sent us, which James sent to us, an email, he had 4 letters to DOE Savannah River Site listing priorities for fiscal year 2023 budget. The letters from the Environmental Protection Agency, South Carolina DHEC, and the SRS Community Reuse Organization, not one of them included PILT as an SRS budget priority. Not even the Governor's Nuclear Advisory Council. So I'll conclude with this. I believe that the lobbying for PILT budget funding should be the responsibility of the elected officials and local government, not the SRS CAB. Our focus should be, primary focus should be assisting SRS with remediation and decommissioning activities. Thank you.
All right, any comments? AK?
AK Hassan Cab. I just need to be clear on some information. When we talked about this a couple of years ago, I seem to recall that Mr. Budney indicated that he usually allocates some funds for this, whether CAB asked for it or not, or whatever. Or did I misunderstand something that he said regarding those funds?
Mike is back, but so this is one of those difficult ones. But what you hear from us more often than not is that the position of the department is reflected ultimately in the president's budget request. And so if that budget request doesn't have the number in there, it's reflective of either what the department sent over or what the administration has chosen to move forward with. We don't get to convey what we may have developed at the site or requested at the site level, public meetings.
I'm still not clear. Does that mean that in the local budget, there is no money for these items, or is there money? The reason why I'm asking, because obviously SRS is a site, the CAB is a site-specific board. And so if the local administration is allocating funds for it, then the local administration obviously feels like it's important, and there's some degree of tolerance for them to allowing from the national budget for that to take place. So I wouldn't want to undermine that process if the local administration feels like it's something that should be continued.
Now, we get to implement the budget that's passed to us, but you're not going to hear us in a public session say, this is what we prepared at the site level to go up to headquarters.
It's just a question.
It's not gonna happen.
He just can't answer it the way that.
Yes, but what I'm saying is, it's like the reality. Was funds allocated for it, and did the parties receive the funds or not? Not so much addressing the.
Yes, so if funds are allocated, through the appropriations process, it is paid to the respective counties.
Candace.
All right. Thank you.
My question is, has CAB, prior to this letter, have we requested that in our budget letter before?
Yes, this is, the letter we started with was last year's letter.
I mean, prior to this.
Prior to last year.
Is this something that CAB has
I
traditionally
can't
done?
remember if it was in earlier versions.
Yeah, it's in 2019, yeah.
Which version have you got? So this is the 2019 that he's on, which was the FY21. So since at least at the FY21, it has been in there. Or the FY21 request, right? So we're on 24. So you asked for it in 21, 22, and 23. Okay.
I want to ask the same question another way, and that
All right.
is, since this is last year's letter, and Mr. Budney or his administration usually responds when they're in agreement, disagreement, and elaborate or whatever, did the administration's response to this particular letter last year, did they reject the idea of the item that we're discussing? Or what was their position on that item?
Yeah.
No, this is not a recommendation. This is just the CAB's priority. So when we're building a budget, this information goes, to the site, to headquarters, to help in the building of the budget.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, it comes down to what goes in that presidential request, and finally what Congress appropriates.
Mike, I need you in a microphone. I know that you're loud, but I've got people online that can't hear you without it.
So the letter you're talking about was last year related to the FY23 budget, which has not been released yet. So we don't comment on the budget because we work for the administration. The president hasn't released the budget yet. We naturally support whatever our boss says to do. He hasn't said what to do yet, so we're standing by.
And those numbers are embargoed. You can't even talk about really what you sent up in the first place, right? Phyllis, let me get yours, and then I'll get Candace, and then Dave. I know you've been itching. Phyllis?
I was just going to say, I know that I can't remember the timing, but in history in the last 10, 15 years, there's been at least one occasion when there was an effort to eliminate the pilot program. And I think it's kind of like what I said earlier about the other thing. I don't think it hurts to remind them, yes, this is important.
Yeah. There have been versions of budgets that have come out that it did not have built in them and that was later added in. Candace?
So if we do not include this in our priority letter, is it requested somewhere else by another entity, or listed somewhere else as a priority by another entity?
The department very well may add it anyway. So remember, this is your input into how they structure their budget, really just your opinion on what they should do. What they do with that information afterwards?
I want to address that question, Candace. Just, if you guys don't put it, I promise you, Congress, these local governments, trust me, they make their voices heard. So yes, the department hears about it from, yes.
Dave?
Well, let me just follow up on that. In the fiscal year 2022 budget, this Omnibus Appropriations Act that the President just signed, there were over 4,000 earmarks in that budget. So they do a pretty good job of getting the things funded that they want to have funded. So this is going to get funded, and is it in our scope? Is it in our purview to go after this PILT money? I just don't believe that it's. If you look at the mission of the CAB, I just don't believe that. And if we're supposed to be focusing on remediation and decommissioning of the site, I just don't believe that this has a place to be in this letter. Never have.
Any other thoughts? Phyllis?
I was just going to say, considering the fact that much of our job is outreach, I think it behooves us to say when it's something important to the community. And all that tax money that we don't get is important to this community, to the people that we represent.
Yeah, I mean, whether or not you put it in here or not, I would argue that recommending that SRS be a good neighbor is probably within the work scope of the board.
Is that something?
I'm looking at Amy to like either chastise me or not. Yeah, okay. You went too far this time. Candace? No? Okay.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
We learned from the Community Reuse Organization presentation that in 2020 operations at the Savannah River site generated $2.2 billion economic impact in 5 counties, including Aiken, Allendale, and Barnwell, and then 2 Georgia counties. So SRS had a $2.4 billion influence, and this was because 2020 was down because of the pandemic, he said. But there was $2.4 billion influence in 2016 and 2010. So I'm just, we're talking about a few million here, not that really should be in our purview.
So at the moment, we've got Dave, who's a voice in the wilderness. Right? I haven't heard any. So let's see. Is there any support for Dave's position?
Yes.
Yeah, Greg?
A couple of things real quick. I in my first couple of years, I remember this came up because there had been threats to remove this funding, and that's why we put it in. As I recall, it hadn't, longer term, that had not been in there. Second, I think Amy is correct that the local representatives, the members of Congress and such, are going to go after this hard. They're not going to let this money go away because that's big money for the local communities, the local governments. I'm convinced by Dave's argument. It's outside the scope of our purview. It doesn't advance cleanup, in my opinion, at least at this point. Now, before this, I was not on that side, but Dave convinced me. So, way to go, Dave. Get me in trouble.
DeAndre?
One of the things I think that we sometimes get caught up in is the political side of things. This is just from my personal opinion. We have to be good stewards over that which we're entrusted in. If we're going to be a citizen advisory board, I think that also goes to being a good community partner with those that are fighting to make sure that this funding stays. It may not necessarily be that we're the ones that's leading the effort, but for them to be able to refer to that being something important that the CAB not recommended, but we just talked about and noted that it was important, helps them in their cause and their fight. Yes, it may not be directly our responsibility to lead the charge, but I do think it's our duty to participate and to support. With that being said, I think we have a valid point for those that support it and those that don't support it being there. But that's just my personal opinion, that I think we have to be good stewards over that and be good community partners with those that are fighting.
Okay. Let's go Jim, and then Phyllis, and then Steve, and we'll see where we stand.
I remember things pretty much the same way Greg does, that what was happening was the PILT money was put into the budget. It was removed at some stage in the administration process, and then when it went to Congress, Congress corrected that so that things were funded and have been funded every year. The interesting question is, you've got 3 counties in South Carolina that are getting money. I'm not aware of any money going to Georgia. It seems to stop at the river. Fascinating situation. So,
Geography.
Yeah.
So payment in lieu of taxes is paid to the counties that don't get property taxes. So the Savannah River site is in South Carolina, in Allendale, Barnwell, and Aiken counties. So that's why they are the only recipients of that funding.
Phyllis?
If you don't think it's appropriate for this, is it something, Narendra suggested, is it something that we could recommend as a committee, as a separate recommendation? Would that be better? Does it matter?
I mean, this is, a recommendation is good, would be responded to by Mike Budney, right? So really you'd be getting his, view, and I think he's telling us pretty clearly what he would be able to say in response to that. Would not be very much. This, however, this letter that we're writing is going to follow up through the chain DOESR's budget submission. This goes with them. So it's not just here, it keeps going up the ladder.
Okay.
So if you want that known, it needs to be known here. Steve?
Yeah, I was afraid as a new guy to even bring it up, but I spent too many years on stuff like this thinking about who's my audience. My audience is way beyond Mr. Budney, and if we're trying to play nice in the community, I'm not sure I see the harm. Talked about some other things, getting rid of this.
So generally,
Yeah, we know that decommissioning is going to proceed, but when you take it out, you are sending a message to another audience. You have multiple audiences. We have multiple audiences, whether we recognize it or not or wish to. And I think playing nice in the community tells you something like that, it's harmless. It may not impact or be the purview of the addressee, but there's a wider audience looking.
Kim?
All right, Kim Ray, CAB. I heard a couple of people mention our mission here, so took the time to pull our mission statement out. And it does say in the very last line that the CAB may also ask, subject to EM approval, or be asked by EM to provide advice and recommendations on any other EM project or issue. So I certainly think the PILT is an issue. So unless they're not asking our opinion, I think we certainly can have an opinion, and I do believe that that money is very important to these communities, and I think we ought to support them, and therefore it ought to stay in the letter.
Okay. So we've had a lot of conversation about this and a lot of talk. Can I get, I'm going to look around the room. Give me the thumbs up again as we go around whether or not you want to remove this. So thumbs up if you want to remove it. Yeah, thumbs up if you want to remove it. Okay. So it looks like the majority really want to keep this in. Is that something that we can let go? We okay with that? What is the definition of consensus that I use? I can live with it and support it? Are we at that stage here? The majority want to keep this. Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns about this letter? All right. Everybody got an idea of how you plan to vote on this for tomorrow? Do we need any more discussion on this today? We all good?
Excuse me.
Yeah.
It's not a major issue, but it just has to do with the aesthetics of the letter. And so going back to priorities, and so you said last year decided to eliminate the numbers because you did not want to implement that one thing took a priority over another. However, I heard in the conversation here that there's an assumption. And then by the fact that you said, well, let's move this from here to here, obviously there seems to be priorities. So, I mean, are there priorities or are there not priorities? If one thing takes priority over another, then go ahead and put the numbers, or state that this one thing takes priority over another. But I just thought about that as the discussion was going on. It seems that there are priorities because that's what was said.
Does anyone else want to put numbers back in? Or are you okay with leaving as it implied with the list? I'm going to take that as we are okay with it being implied via list. Okay. Anything else, folks? All right, so we can go ahead and put this down. We'll take this down. This is going to be it for today. One last piece of business that we need to take care of. We have one vacant committee chair position that is for the Administrative and Outreach Committee. That is the committee that looks in the rules and processes of the board, as well as oversees outreach activities. Do you have those? Okay, Heather's got those. She's going to pass out ballots for you. Bobby Williams is running for chair. There's also a line to write in. If you would, just go ahead and mark your selection or write in your selection if you would, please. I'll come around and pick them up, hand them to Delisa. She can count them. If you do me a favor, after you vote, fold it in half for me. Not that, secret ballots are all that important, but, we like to try. I'm hoping to. All right. Will you fold these in half for me? I know, I'm being picky. This is what happens. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dave. And then one last piece of business after this. Oh, come on, guys. Oh, right, you just got it. Go ahead and mark it down for me. I'm looking for a pen to work. You gotta bring your own. We only give the bum pens. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it. Here you go, Lisa. Now, while she's counting those out, for those of you who are interested in serving on the Administrative and Outreach Committee, we'll be holding up an outreach and administrative meeting almost immediately after this. We're probably going to take like a 10-minute little rest break, and then those of us who attend that will go. It'll be across the hall for Administrative and Outreach. Don't feel obligated to attend, but if you're interested in that subject at all, I got you, Dave. That'll be something that we do. And as soon as Delisa finishes counting, she will tell us exactly who's going to chair that meeting, because I guarantee it will not be me. Dave.
I'll be back.
Yeah, right over there.
How is the administrative and outreach meeting today going to be different from the meeting that's being held at lunchtime tomorrow?
This is just a general gathering of the committee, try to work on some of the business that they're talking about. The Administrative and Outreach Committee meeting that's going to take place during lunch tomorrow will be a little more broad, invite everybody to the table. We're going to have some wider discussions. Participation is voluntary. You know, how deep through the stack are you? Can we count it? 3 more? Bobby, you'll be chairing that meeting. All right. Any closing remarks, questions, comments, concerns that we need to address today in order to consider today successful? Greg, you want to adjourn us for the day?
Yeah, thank you all. Hey, I was gonna mention I'm very impressed with the energy and engagement today. Thank you. It was fantastic first day. I hope to see you at the at the A&O meeting if you have time and the interest. And otherwise, we are recessed, right?
Recessed, yeah.
Wait, until tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Don't forget.
Thank you all.